Saturday morning. Welcome, everybody. Another Patriots Lament online only Saturday. We got Corey and Josh. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
Mike will be probably joining us shortly here. And then we got a couple other people who might join in. We also have a caller number. We'll throw it out. We will throw it out right now. It's a little more limited than the station's call-in number. But there you go.
One at a time.
One at a time. So hour one, we kind of wanted to make this an Alaska-specific issue or episode. Hour one, just general coronavirus stuff. Dunleavy did his update yesterday evening. You checked that out, Josh. What was that all about?
I'm sorry.
What's the update from the Gov? And there's some other stuff going on at Fairbanks too.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. I wasn't ignoring you. I got a text right at the same time. Looked important. So Dunleavy yesterday says that introduced or invoked emergency order, I think 11 and 12 yesterday. So that order 11 was a mandated shelter at home. That's stay at home, shelter at home. It's kind of funny. Some of us watched the live broadcast of it, and what he was saying and what his health director, whatever she is, was saying kind of contradicted each other, because he was saying, now this doesn't have anything to do if you want to go snow machining or skiing or this and that. And he's going on about all these outside activities. And then his gal and the state official website says it's okay if you kind of hang out in your room, in your yard a little bit. And it's okay if you want to go for a short walk, but don't go to parks. Don't do that. Stay home. So it was just kind of funny. I didn't see any threatening stuff in the law, but there's no sense in having a law unless you can put a hammer down with it. There is a email. I think Mike said there was a place where you could email or call in if you see your neighbors or a business not conducting themselves the way that you want them to. You can call or email the state of Alaska so they can go get your neighbor. Which, now, we certainly suggest people saturate that number and email with fake and phony things about different politicians or things like that. We wouldn't want to abuse the system at all, but we'll find the number and email and set it up here for you so you have quick access if you so choose to, not endorsed by us. Because the reason I'm not saying we fully endorse it, because we could probably go to jail for doing that at this time.
Do not put gasoline in your wood-burning stove.
Exactly. That's a good point. We saw today a news story where a guy's being charged with a terrorist action in Alaska for claiming he had COVID-19. I think he got pulled over for some whatever reason, and he threatened the officers with his sickness, and they charged him with a terrorist threat. So he's a terrorist. So you got to be careful what you do as far as the state publicly. And so, all right, moving on. Action number 12, or emergency law 12, restricts intrastate travel. They don't want you traveling from community to community in the state of Alaska. And there's some that as far as businesses, and the state has decided what is an essential business and what is not. Mostly what the state considers essential is whatever keeps them moving. So if a restaurant doesn't keep the state going, the state government going, then the restaurant gets. So I don't know. I got lots of text messages about martial law and this and that, and it's not a declared martial law, but I don't know a whole bunch what's different about a martial law, and you have to stay in your home or else. You can still go get groceries. I imagine people in North Pole can travel to the Fairbanks community if they need to go to Costco and stuff like that. But
There's a term, a distinction without a difference.
mm-hmm.
I think the term I saw was enforced quarantine or something like that. Which those two words together kind of sounds like martial law.
They made good movies about stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. Alaska's getting. I misspoke yesterday. I thought they were getting about $2 billion from the emergency relief package, but it looks like they're just getting a little over $1 billion. So it'd be interesting to see what the state does with that. If that makes them a little more anxious to pass the Alaska relief package that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes out of the PFD fund? The
I believe
Alaska
so.
relief? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Which, as Dave pointed out yesterday, would probably more than likely just mean hello income tax, hello state sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
Forever.
Well,
they don't get rid of those things.
Right, you can't start the tax if that money's still there, and that it's like enough for a PFD, but not enough to fund the government, and you can't have one. You can't have the taxes if that's still there. So it's a good way to wipe that out. It's for a good cause.
It's for a good cause.
It's a good point.
Yeah, it is kind of. It would kind of be a relief in a lot of ways. For that fund to be gone, because it would remove the political side of that. But yeah, we're gonna get into that more in the second hour too, like the PFD budget thing. We'll dive into. What about what the Carlson Center is set up now as a medical facility?
It's being turned into a medical facility. They call it something like a small hospital or something like. I don't remember exactly what the term was, but
step down, I think you said.
Yeah, step down. Perfect. So probably not as sophisticated as a real building would have in it, but which I thought was a great idea for the borough because it's been so long since we even cared about the Carlson Center, but I know it's $600,000 or $700,000 a year to keep that thing up and going. So I imagine they could probably double the hospital rate when they rent that sucker out to them and cash in. Might see a property tax decrease.
Fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, all of them.
Did they do that with the Sullivan Arena in Anchorage? Do you know?
The Sullivan and Ben Boeke. Yeah, both of those have been turned into homeless shelters.
Okay.
They, and I can't say because I wasn't there. But from what I read, they basically rounded up all the homeless people and shoved them in there so they could contain the spread of the disease among the homeless.
Do you think this could be? Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say that the other excuse was to take pressure off of the local shelters there in town.
Right. I imagine it'd be hard to keep the staff safe as well,
Mhm.
and willing to come to work and all that. Have you heard anything about homeless in other cities? I know Seattle has kind of they have a big homeless population that um, was kind of at risk when that outbreak first happened there. But I never heard anything about it spreading in the homeless community there.
They
Um,
put people up in hotels, didn't they, David?
Okay.
yep, they did. Josh in Seattle was talking about that. The state of California also took over basically all the hotels statewide, or they passed a law that said they could. And so they've been like in Los Angeles and stuff. Do you think this could be a reason that pro sports got canceled? Just to free up the stadiums?
Hmm.
Wow.
Well, they don't have to cancel it. The homeless could be the audience. They could give them those things that.
The big foam fingers and the balloons. Yeah, the noodles. That's a good point.
I wonder, does it make sense that they concentrate these several hundred to thousands of people into one building? Or would they be actually safer roaming around their parks and benches and sidewalks and stuff? I mean, I imagine, so homeless people are going to be around them or whatever, but I think that most people socially distance from the homeless during regular business hours anyway. So I wonder if concentrating them
I think
guarantees more people to be sick.
being out in the cold and not being able to have access to hygienic facilities is probably a bigger health risk. Even though they're all together, if you're warm, your immune system has, especially with respiratory stuff, when it's cold out, it slows the blood flow in your sinuses, and then that's why you get that's why you can get colds after being out and getting too cold. So.
I always thought the cold weather in the winter times in Alaska helped with the homeless population naturally.
Yeah, it does.
Pressure to move, or
it has an impact. It has an impact for sure.
They freeze.
Concentrating sick people. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much stuff, there's so much stuff that's like, oh, you should isolate and distance yourself. But you're not allowed to go anywhere. So like if you live in an urban area, you can't distance yourself. I mean, you can lock yourself in your apartment, but there's all these contradictory requirements. So I don't know. But that is quite
to some degree, it's just the best that you can do, or if you don't know which action to take, picking one and sticking with it is often better than doing several things and trying to find the best one. So.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in self-isolation or quarantine with somebody else in your apartment, you are basically going to get it as well. But while you get it, it's not like that person's out spreading it to 10 other people, right? Somebody still gets it because of that action, or that law, but on average, fewer people get it. And government always makes decisions based on statistics. It's not about the individual. So if it's statistically going to help the population, or statistically going to get the outcome they want, then they'll go with that. But you can have the case where what's good for you, what's good for the herd is not good for you. So you gotta balance that.
Leela comments in the YouTube comments that COVID-19 can be surface transmitted. So that's a reason for having the homeless in one spot. Does it survives longer? I mean, viruses in general can do better in cold climates too, right? They're kind of preserved by that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
heat's what destroys them. Heat
Right.
and certain levels of humidity. So
So in Fairbanks, it's cold and dry, so spreading it
it'll last
outdoors in
longer.
public spaces would be bad news. Yeah, assuming it hasn't already come through Fairbanks, which is a different discussion.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that, and it's all hard because different places are testing at different rates. But if you follow the spread of the positive tests and the exponential growth curve in various areas and cities in the U.S., it could be that there's different strains, or that there was something else like it that came through in January or February. But the numbers are sure looking like it's its own spread that's happening in different locations in the country right now.
So you don't think it's a artifact of testing methodology?
Sorry, I got a call coming in. The notification is blocking the answer button. So, yes, it could be that there's more testing, and that's why we're seeing more cases. But if there's not cases there, you could do lots of testing and still not find cases. So
That's true. Are there any places where they've done a lot of testing and have not found cases?
South Korea, they had a lot of false, not in the U.S. that I know of. No,
A lot of negatives. So they actually caught it.
Right, we did see that in the numbers coming out of South Korea a while ago.
Okay.
And there was lots of negative results.
Okay.
Do we know how many people have been tested in Alaska?
Mm-hmm. There is a number for that. I think there's a graph, and there's two categories. One is commercial tests, and then one is state-given tests.
Well,
I'll see if I can.
So commercial tests for hospital?
No, like
I
private.
think commercial tests would be like LabCorp.
Oh, got it.
Oh, Rick was trying to call in.
Yeah, it came in here, but I think there was no audio, so he hung up.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Give it a shot again, Rick. We'll fold you in here.
Preemptively move this window so
it can answer.
Click answer.
How long is Dunleavy's order for?
Point.
What's the duration?
So the shelter and home is till the 11th of April.
Okay.
And then it'll be reevaluated.
Right.
The intrastate travel, intercommunity travel is in place till the 21st of April, and it'll be reevaluated at that time.
Okay.
Which is interesting that the travel ban is 10 days longer than the stay-at-home one. I thought it was interesting.
That is interesting. We're going to bring Mr. Rick on. Rick, you are online.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey.
Working?
All right.
Yeah, it's working good.
Okay, good. I'm getting the YouTube off here, so because there's quite a delay between what I'm receiving and what you guys are saying. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting listening to the governor. I had once the other, he introduced the other people. I could only listen to it for so long, and then I had to get off because my blood was starting to boil at that point. I just, and then I went back this morning and I reread the entire document, and I really don't see that much change from previous. I mean, did you see much? You can still go to the store. You can still pretty much do whatever you want, as long as you practice your distancing, so to speak. So I guess I'm wondering, what do you guys think about it? I mean, Josh, your business is essential, right? So you're still going.
Yeah.
My business is considered essential, so we're still going. Other than restaurant workers and such, I don't see much difference, and when I was out in the store yesterday, I mean, people were right beside me, and they're putting the tape on the floor and stuff, where you're supposed to stand 6 feet apart. And so I'm kind of mixed on this whole thing because, at first I was very adamantly, sure this whole thing was just a hoax, to cover things up, for this fiscal collapse, or appears to be ensuing in that direction. But now I'm not so sure. Maybe I'm being inundated with the media to such a degree that I'm starting to believe it. Because I do fall in the age range of somebody that could be in a well, the CDC is saying I should be hunkering down and not going out anywhere. And so, our company is saying, we have to stay out there because we provide essential services, but I'm conflicted now as to whether I should just go, well, I'm taking leave without pay. What do you guys think about?
There's a group. Yeah. So, I mean, we've been talking about this on our broadcast every few days as well. Like, is it real? Is it not real? What metric do we use to determine that? And it's not entirely clear yet, but there are some doctors who are coming out. It's kind of like engineers and architects for 9/11 truth. And they're saying that if there wasn't a test for coronavirus specifically, if you just lumped all the numbers into global viral infections, then this would be a statistically unusual, but not particularly brutally bad year for that stuff. And one of the doctors in this group noted that in Italy, they are simply tagging all dead bodies as coronavirus deaths, and that upon reassessment, they found that 88% of the coronavirus deaths were actually people who died of something else. They
may have tested positive, but they died of another condition.
Yeah, like a heart attack, right?
Sure.
Or something like that, not like pneumonia.
So coronavirus can attack the heart. There's ACE2 receptors in the heart as well as lungs that it goes after. So.
Yeah, so you can do that. You can run your statistics that way. In Germany, they have 0.3% fatality, and they also have an old population. The demographics are very similar. Just the way that they are tallying the deaths are different. It's a there isn't a physical demographic difference. It's just how they are running the numbers. And so I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
I would say something that is weird though is that the in Italy the stress on their hospitals and their healthcare systems is really being tested, and the reports from the doctors who are exhausted after working 10, 12-hour shifts, that I would say is abnormal. That's something that you don't see every year. So regardless of what it is, something is going on that is not your normal flu season.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
if
To
it
me, it's
wasn't
like,
in the,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, if it wasn't in the media, like if we didn't know about this, if we weren't able to see that it came, it started in China, this and that, you wouldn't have the, doctors working 10, 12 hours a day because people wouldn't be going to the hospital nearly as much. They would just think they had the flu.
Well,
It's
that,
like-
that was one of the other statistics
these are-
we have in there is how many people have actually been hospitalized. It's very few, as far here in Alaska, very few, relative to the number of cases out there. Most people are just sent home, because just like with the flu, there's nothing else you can do really, until you get to the ventilator stage. What I don't know what else you would do, and I agree. You wouldn't even notice it really. They might. Well, remember when the swine flu was going on? I mean, they made a note of it, but I don't remember changing my lifestyle or anything like that. I don't remember washing my hands more frequently or anything. Back then. And I definitely remember because I did get the flu back then, and it might have been swine flu or something because it was pretty bad. I did get pneumonia. So it's not. But I just figured that's what happens. You get flu, you get over it, or you don't. That's just life. Eventually, you're gonna become susceptible to something, and it's gonna get you. You get old enough, your immune system just can't cover all that. That's what happens. And so I think it was this pressure of the Fairbanks doctors, the letter they sent to the governor, along then with this in-state death that triggered, him coming out there yesterday and doing this again, right? So, we were going to be doing some business down in Healy next week, and now I don't know if we're going to be doing that or not. And even though we're an essential business, we're pretty much dead. We're just hanging around. Somebody was talking about that earlier. I don't know if it was on this show or another show I was listening to, where they were saying people are just kind of making work at work, trying to justify their jobs. Those that do still have jobs. And there is a degree of that, I will say. And I'm thinking about just if things are still dead next week, just taking leave without pay and sheltering in place, as they're saying. But not because I feel so much like I'm going to get sick or something, but because I can't stand the boredom, for one, of make work. I hate that, and just the way people are acting now, I just want to go get away from it.
What changed your, like Corey brings up a good point, which we're still talking about, and we haven't figured out ourselves. How come there's such big differences in different parts of the world with all this thing? What changed your mind on this, Rick?
You mean as far as taking it more seriously?
Yeah.
Well, I think a part of it is, when I started reading the stories about what happens to people when they do take the turn for the worse, it goes bad. It goes south fast, and all these people so far, like the woman that died in Anchorage had a complication as well.
Mhm.
which they mentioned at the very bottom of the article. But they felt that her underlying complications could have definitely had something to do with it. I think that's the way they put it in the Daily News, Anchorage Daily News article. But, it's like in a lot of cases, how do you know really if you have an underlying condition until it's too late?
Mhm.
So I guess I'm coming to the fear of it, in that degree, to some degree.
So
Because I feel like it is clearly it's a lot more contagious than what they appear to have been saying, but I don't know that it's any more deadly, except to certain populations. But I've been saying right along, anybody can go to this to look at the websites, and you can see that the flu has been much deadlier in the United States and across the world this year, and every year virtually. So I keep, I know it's hype, but it's one of those things you can't see it. So it's like witchcraft or something, you never know when you're going to be hit by it or whatever. You just don't know. And you can't tell if what you're doing is adequate. So you're always driven to do more. Scrub your hands. Scrub. and I'm on. There's the other side. The George Carlin side. You got to be exposed to germs. You have to be exposed to germs in order to have an adequate immune system. So there's all that. It's not a clear thing at all. And a lot of it, I think, I blame on the U.S. government and their lack of, they were trying to, the CDC was, keeping the screws on the labs and stuff from doing their testing and stuff like that. So, that delayed getting tests, of people in an adequate fashion or adequate time span. They wanted to develop their own test, and then that test came out, and it was clearly had issues. And just I don't know, the whole thing is, on the one hand, I want to cooperate on, because I don't want to spread it or do anything like that. But at the same time, it really irritates me being told what to do, as far as that you will hunker down or you will shelter.
Yeah, and for the right reasons too, Rick, because you don't Dunleavy, the state of Alaska, the federal government doesn't deserve your trust in them at all when they tell you to stay at home. They don't deserve you to trust the numbers they put out. They haven't earned any trust for their actions, reactions, overreactions.
And they've shown over the past, they've always lied. I mean, at what point do you quit believing that kind of stuff, And here's another one I was just thinking about is, you probably heard Andrew Cuomo came out and said maybe they made a mistake forcing all these people to shut down and shelter in place because they took all the students out of the dorms and sent them back home with their parents and grandparents, and it's like, you're exposing the elderly right at that point, putting them into close contact with each other, and then wonder why suddenly the communal rate, increased there. To me, it's the wrong idea in many ways, putting people, cramming them into places like that.
Yeah.
That was another thing too. They were talking about in one of the big differences is the way people live there. That they tend to live in family structures. Grandparents, parents, kids. They don't go and put them in an old folks' home. Everybody lives together, much as they did in the United States years ago. And they also have a thing they do there where they kiss on the lips in saying hello and goodbye. And, it's part of their culture.
They're good Catholic people.
Yeah, but it's on the lips. That's the thing. And it's not, it's not a sexual thing at all, like Americans tend to think of it at all. It's just a greeting or a goodbye or whatever. And it's considered an insult to the older culture if you don't do that. And so that's another thing that I think possibly led to their spreading it faster and infecting the elderly more.
Yeah, there's every region we can kind of see there's different ways that it spreads.
Yeah, and then you were asking about why some got it more. Another one was China. Well, China, obviously, they have also cultural differences in ours, and one of them is close contact, or that their actual, everybody has a social distance. Their social distance is much closer together than ours. Ours is, when ours is about 3 feet. People start coming within that. If you don't know them real well, you start to get uncomfortable. And whereas in China, Japan, you look at those, just look at the trains and stuff, but how they just pack people in there, and that's completely different. I don't think a lot of us, if you haven't been there, it's hard to understand that. How
that also might be a urban versus rural difference. People in cities are used, in general, even in the U.S., people pack in tighter in cities.
Well, and I wondered if
my
that
wife,
might be part of New York's issue.
My wife's aunt's a missionary in China. I remember, long before this, when she came back and I was talking to her about being over there, one of the things she had said was that the distance, they don't have the American thought of your own.
No, touching you or bumping into you or whatever doesn't bother them in the least.
Yeah.
They don't even, where you go, excuse me or whatever, they just, it's
and they kind of get right in your face when they talk.
So in New York, they were trying to reduce the number of people that were using public transports and subways. So they cut the service by, I think 20 or 25%. And instead of reducing the number of people that used it, it forced everyone who was still using it into tighter spaces. So then the subways were running at over capacity. So they tried to reduce demand by reducing supply.
They failed their basic economics.
That always works. Well, there's the public transportation here in Fairbanks, I just read it yesterday, is still going. The transit, the little borough buses running around. So, I mean, there's another one of those things that
Fred Meyer yesterday, when I was there, it said on the pole outside, at West Fred's, it said on the pole, it said the borough bus and the van transit are not running at this time. On a sign right on the pole.
Huh. I just read it yesterday in the paper. Or
I know, and it says in there that that's one of the essential services too.
Right. Which isn't that kind of one of those things where you're like getting two signals? The public transportation.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I read is that they are supposedly still running it, but only for essential customers. People who need to get to people who work for an essential business. In other words, you can't just be a casual customer on the bus.
Oh,
right.
okay.
So who checks that though? Is that the driver's responsibility?
Maybe they're doing appointments.
There was a clause in the announcement yesterday that air carriers, it was not their responsibility to verify who was getting on their planes that were going out to small communities. And that
it said they were supposed to take their word, right?
Yeah, Yeah, and if the person lies, then the state has recourse there, but it wouldn't fall on the air carriers to verify everyone.
Right. Interesting. Well, anyway, I just thought I'd throw my 2 cents in there, because it feels like it's the psychological thing that's the hardest, I think, when you get into this. And
so, Rick, I got a question for you. What do you do if the government orders you to do something that you believe to be true?
Well, I question why they would order me to do it. If it was true, I wouldn't need to be ordered. If I felt it was in my best interest.
That's a good answer.
Does that make sense? I mean,
Yes,
Yeah.
that does make
Yeah.
sense.
That to me is like seatbelt laws.
Right.
If it's good for me, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I don't know, Rick. One of the things whenever I get a little carried away, I keep looking back that we're at like 635,000 people in the world now of 7.7 billion. That
Right.
doesn't register anything.
No.
More people than that have been killed in Yemen for no good reason at all. And no one's worried about that.
I agree. It's total overreaction, and at the same time, we're not paying any attention over the last few weeks of what Pompeo and those people are doing, over in the Middle East, and that's all just dropped right off the radar.
Well, on local laws domestic laws, I think, were we going to talk about that at all today, guys? Some of the domestic stuff in Washington being pushed through.
Yeah. I mean, this hour is as good as any, because next hour we want to get into oil and the PFD and stuff like that.
Oh, you don't have to take a break.
No, it is nice to demarcate different subject topics, though. But the domestic. Well, so the domestic laws. One of the things that jumps out to me immediately is use of the language, a necessary service, right, or critical. What's the term they're using?
Essential.
Essential. That's central planning. And
who determines what's essential?
Right. And you could easily say, well, okay, transporting food to Fairbanks is more important than the Vietnamese noodle restaurant, right? You could say that. But where exactly do you put that line? And in our agreement that some services are more essential than others, I think everybody agrees that that's true. We've agreed to allow someone else to decide what that is and to remove the negotiation power that the market has over that. Like the way the market decides what's essential is through the pricing mechanism.
Yeah.
And if you told people, well, it's this whole thing, it's this whole conundrum of if you presented people with this is how bad the disease is, like the question Corey just asked you, Rick, what would you do if the government ordered you to do something that you thought was right? Most people are already sheltering in place and maintaining distance from other people, even if they don't believe they're high risk. Like, I don't believe I'm high risk, but I have a lot of friends who are in their 70s and 80s here who likely would not survive even a bad flu. And so I'm not going to expose myself to them for no reason. But so there's no order needed there. But for determining what's essential and what's not essential, like, why do you need to order people to do this when they're already doing most of it? And then setting that aside, how does that unwind? Like, now that everybody's agreed that the government can decide what's an essential service and what isn't in a time of a flu, basically, how often will this be re-invoked? Will this be an annual thing?
I think it's quite likely or quite possible.
Who knows?
Because all they have to do is focus the. Well, it's really difficult to say at this point because I am still so unsure of how we're going to come out of this on the other side. You know, how is life? A lot of people I'm listening to now are saying this is the black swan event, and it will never be the same again, and you better get used to it.
Is there another side?
Yeah,
we might be on. This might be what the other side looks like.
What I'm talking about is this, kind of like what Trump is saying, like we're going to flip the switch back on Easter Sunday, and hallelujah in the morning, America is great again. That seems the message he's putting out to me.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how that is really going to happen. A lot of supply lines and a lot of people are done, and they're not going to be coming back. And I'm reading also
resurrection for many businesses.
Food production workers, the people who supply the food at the very beginning of the chain, are being heavily impacted. And it's like, and we're cutting off people coming across the border who normally would come in and do, food work, planting crops, etc., helping the farmers and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a very big concern that, like Dunleavy said in his deal, please stop hoarding. We anticipate no interruption of the food supply chain. It's like, well, how deeply are you looking?
Mm-hmm.
Or then why are you worried about it?
Sure, people. Yeah.
Did you guys see the message, the PSA sent out by the FDIC?
Yeah.
Can we play that?
Yeah, I can play it. Yeah.
Great.
Throw that on your StreamYard. Can you do a screen share from your StreamYard? Because I
believe I can. Let me find it here.
Because it's sort of the same thing. It's like, hey, don't take your money out of the bank because everything's fine. It's like, whoa, there's a red flag.
I did see that, and as a matter of fact, one of the blogs I was looking at was saying that very thing. They were saying, I think it's Bison Prepper or somebody like that. He was saying, whoa, when anybody tells you, please don't do this, everything is just fine. That's the time to run screaming with your hair on fire to the bank and get everything out now.
Okay, I got it here.
Rad. Oh, there it is. There you go. Let me do this one. Yeah, let it rip.
Oh, I'm just seeing a little tab there.
Yeah, I'm getting the weird little
full screen.
Okay, give me. Yeah.
Okay.
Stand by. Do entire screen. Wow.
Nice.
We good?
Yep. Kick the tires.
Unprecedented time. At a time of a pandemic like this, it is way too easy to get confused and to have fear about what you should be doing with your money in your accounts, especially as you're looking at the volatility in the stock market and the financial sector. This is what I would like you to take away from this. Your money is safe at the banks. The last thing you should be doing is pulling your money out of the banks now, thinking that it's going to be safer someplace else. You don't want to be walking around with large wads of cash, and you certainly don't want to be putting cash in your mattress. It didn't pan out well for so many people. And I will tell you this, no depositor has lost a penny of their insured deposits since 1933, when the FDIC was created. So if you're talking about having your money in a safe place, please keep it in an FDIC insured bank.
Ow.
That's terrifying.
That can
Absolutely terrifying.
Have you seen the comedy series This Is Not Happening?
No.
Have any of you guys seen that?
No.
I forget who does it. It's on YouTube.
I've heard of it.
It's pretty great. It's comedians and performers who tell of their worst disasters ever on stage. And it's absolutely hilarious. It's a great series. That would be a really good little clip for This Is Not Happening because it's equally hilarious.
Not to
Well,
mention the lady, as soon as you hear her talk, I
wanna
instantly
take
thought
your-
of World Bank.
What's that?
Hello. When I heard her talk, I instantly thought World Bank, reptilians, all those little things. Like,
She blinks sideways with the
Not
second eyelids.
do not take out your money.
Your
It's
money is
safe.
safe with us.
Well, there was one thing I kind of agreed with her on. It's like, if you've got significant sum of money in the bank, of cash in the bank or whatever, in your money market or whatever, it's like, what are you really going to do with it? Weren't you guys talking the other day about them being very slow making transactions and also putting limits on everything?
Mm-hmm.
On what you can just pull out. And like my bank, I don't even think they're open. I think you have to go, withdraw out of a, what are those things called? I haven't done one of those.
ATM?
Money ATM. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way you can get money right now. If you
Well,
want
my
cash.
bank, my
Why
bank
would you
sent
want
an
cash?
email out yesterday. My bank sent an email out yesterday saying that the lobby's closed, and if you need something in person, you have to call in an appointment and give them a good reason why you need to come in, and then they decide whether or not you get to come in or not. And I imagine if it's to withdraw all my cash, it's just hang up the phone.
Be a big no.
Deposits only, please.
Well, and here's the other thing is what are you going to do with that anyway? I mean, I see this big package they're coming out with and everything, and this turning on the spigot, that the feds do. What they're saying, they have an open-ended, mandate to print money.
Yep.
And
You saw the reserve requirement's been removed, right, Rick?
And they got rid of the reserve corps. Yeah, that means they can just print with the band in. And so it's like, whether I, like she says, if I take my money out and put it in the mattress, it'll still be just as worthless.
Right, that's the joke.
What does she mean that didn't pan out well for those people?
Yeah, I don't know.
I was going to ask you the same thing. I thought maybe I missed something in the broadcast.
Did I not hear the stories about the people who lost all their money in their mattress? Or?
I think the government went after some of them, and so I think that's how some of them lost their money.
Oh, okay. So it was a little bit of a threat there.
It's like that didn't pan out very well for
some
some of them. Right. That was the mafia thing.
Right. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to your mattress.
That's right.
Or to you while you're walking down the street with big wads of cash.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to say something about the essential services real quick, and what you were saying about the centralized economy, Dave. Who do we know? Which one of us has a job or does things that we don't deem essential to ourselves? I mean, what individual, does the restaurant worker not think that their job is essential to their livelihood? The barkeep's job is essential to his livelihood. So who does really decide what's essential? So it's essential for the herd. It's the fascist instead of the individual.
What is fascinating about the essential services is they happen to line up. So this essential services line is one that the anthropogenic global warming folks use as well.
Mm-hmm.
Non-essential travel.
I do notice that they all, what they consider to be essential in some fashion or another, support government.
Yep.
It's the machine. It's continuity. It's COG is what it is. It's continuity of government.
COG.
But yeah, the non-essential services are all. If you can make the case that these services are non-essential when there's a bad flu going around, it lines up perfectly with the AGW folks who talk. They talk about non-essential people, right? They talk about non-essential human beings on planet Earth who should be eliminated. So when you got people and You've told them their job is not essential, and then you're paying them just to sit at home. You're basically paying people to watch Netflix for the rest of their lives. That fits in pretty well with the whole, see, the world is overpopulated because we have all of these non-essential people. They have non-essential jobs, they have no income, and the state has to pay them to continue to metabolize.
Well, and I have somewhat of an issue with that, and I don't call them that. I call them the unproductive people or the parasites. I consider that to be basically all government workers, but also the people who feed off the taxpayer system. They're not productive.
So, but the way you would define that, though, Rick, is different. So, in this case, the government's creating, or the rules are creating, a category of people. Like, you have somebody who works at a restaurant. Okay, they are participating in the economy and paying rent, and then their job is deemed non-essential, so they're told to go home. So now they become a tax recipient instead of a tax contributor. And so the government gets to move people from one category to the other by deeming their job essential or non-essential. And what you're talking about, just to clarify, is you're talking about the government workers themselves.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. And others, all those that feed off of that system, the subcontractors, et cetera, what am I thinking of, like Halliburton's, et cetera, all of the military industrial complex, everything that feeds off that system, and that all the way down to our local level. I think that's why one of the reasons why Alaska's in such big trouble is because the percentage of the population that works directly or indirectly for the government keeps this thing going. Well, really, I mean, there's not a lot of things to be productive.
Jones Act.
Doing, here in Alaska, there's not a lot if you're not involved with the government in some way.
Very true. I think we had a little Jones Act shout out there.
What was it?
We were alluding to the effect the Jones Act has on that, among other things, like ways you could reduce government involvement in Alaska's economy with the push of a button.
Yeah. Well, I guess
tricky.
Well, Rick,
I tried the, as another deal on this, on the on the effect of it. I had a plan to go to the store, just do my weekly shopping this morning, and when I say, well, I'm going to try the online shopping with Fred Meyer, and use their app, and go do the where you get the free pickup, and they do the shopping in the store for you, and got on there, and their app is not working. They're saying we are experiencing difficulties. We're very sorry for the inconvenience. But so right at the moment, at any rate, until they get that fixed, and it's probably just being overwhelmed is what that would be my assumption. You can't do that. You must go into the store, even if you're at risk. At this point, if you can't do that, something like that, or find, of course, you could maybe find somebody else that would be willing to take that risk for you to go to the store. Yeah. So anyway, that didn't work for me this morning.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I don't want you to don't lose heart, because don't know if you've heard about the newest Star Wars installment. It's going to be called Collapse of the Empire.
It's supposed to be prophetic, or
let's hope it'll be the best one of the whole saga.
Well, that's what I was talking to Scott, our buddy Scott, about that yesterday, and it's like you want to be a part of that. It would be an exciting time in history to be a part of the, downfall of this empire. But it's like, I have a feeling, that I'm going to be part of the fodder that goes well before the empire does. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've been talking about on our little weekly updates is how do we have all this information. Like people of our persuasion have no shortage of information, right? Libertarian anarchist types, but we have a radical shortage of action. And like I just speak personally, like, oh, I'll go on and on about what's going to happen. I rarely take action. So we have an opportunity now at this point to make a few small actions that'll have a big impact in 1, 2, 3, 5 years, and to keep us out of the fodder category.
And so maybe outline what do you mean by that?
I mean, okay, so first is like, sure. The first thing is if you're staying out of the fear-based action category is like the most useful thing you can do. Like fear is a great motivator. Fear is like a signal that you don't have something in order. And so to the extent that we can get stuff in order, we can make sure that we're not acting out of fear. We don't need to act quickly, right? It's when you have to act quickly to survive. You don't have the luxury of thinking. You have to suspend thinking. And so like FDIC lady there is telling you, hey, your money is going to be devalued if you leave it in the banks. Like she's telling you that. And it's not a matter of whether your dollars are in the bank or not. It's a matter of whether you're in dollars or not. And so we know that. Like all four of us on this call and our listeners right now, we know that if you're in dollars, what's going on now is going to have a long-term effect where your purchasing power is going to be destroyed. And like it used to be this idea that was a long ways off. Like eventually there will be these problems. But now the government's coming out and saying, hey, everything's fine. Don't do anything. So that's a signal to act. So we can do some of that now. We have the option of doing some international diversification. So like Berwick has been doing his videos. I've mostly been enjoying them. I don't agree with 100% of them, but they're fun. And one of the things he keeps talking about is Mexico has taken zero action over coronavirus. None. The borders are open. The stores are open. The bars are open. There has been zero action taken. And they have yet to have a big problem there. There's
My cousin has a Airbnb down in one of the Playa del something or another, Carmen, I think it is. And he was saying that a lot of businesses down there were shutting down.
So that'd be voluntary. That's not government mandated.
It wasn't because of the government. It was because the tourism just went boom, dropped off, dead.
Sure. Yep. Which I believe, because you can't, if you go to Mexico, you can't get back into the United States right now. Right.
Yeah. But it's effectively our government is shutting them down.
Yeah, that sector. But for people who live there, stuff really hasn't changed. And he's been, he hasn't been like gloating about that or anything. He's just like, hey, here's the scary place where people are going to cut my head off, supposedly. And I've been living here for 10 or 15 years, and my head's still on my body. And the government isn't telling us what to do in this crisis. And of course, we've been talking about that. And, we had Jeff on the show, 2011 or something, 9 years ago, the first time. And here we are. And so that's another way to do it. Like getting out of US dollars is one way to do it. And then having a place somewhere where the jurisdictional rules are radically different is another way to do it. And spending a little time there every year so that if it's time to go, you just very calmly walk to the airport and you board your flight and you go there.
Right.
No
you
fear.
You already have a pattern of going there. So
yeah,
it's not to your other home or whatever.
Exactly. And it appears that we're moving into a time when that's like not just kind of a novel idea, but actually a good idea.
Well, I guess I'm at the point now where, because I looked at that for several years, at other places down south of the border, and the hard part for me, is it's family and everything that makes that so difficult. Getting everybody on board to do that, and then if not being able to, making that decision, going, well, I'm leaving you. See ya. And I guess that's.
Well, but then you're in a place to extend a hand to people that need help.
Yeah, even if it's not you. Exactly.
So it's kind of been, where I'm at the point of, where I know you guys were talking about going to Belize or something this last year and stuff, just to look around, and or you had been there before or something like that. But that's one of the places. Costa Rica is another popular one. Panama, but I've kind of just I have to say I had given up on that as a possibility, really. Well, one of the things I always am caught between is, if everybody runs, or that has a connotation right there, saying you're running, but rather than just getting out of the way, but then nobody's going to be left here to stop these, to basically. I don't even know what I'm saying. I know we're not going to stop.
No, I know where you're going. I know where you're going with this. So there's many sides to this, and I'm not prescribing a solution. I'm just saying being in a place where you don't have to act out of fear. Okay, so having some of your wealth outside the banking system is an obvious one, and then having a place you can go. It's not a place you have to go. It's a place you can go. And there's two things that are really cool about that. I have a house on either side of the U.S.-Canadian border now, which is really wonderful, even though they're not really dramatically different as far as the rules. But there's a choice. And even if you don't go, so there's a guy in my house in Alaska right now, and he's a guy I met on the plane a couple weeks ago, and he's stuck in Alaska, and I gave him my card, and I said, hey, if you get stuck in Alaska, I have a place. And he's like, well, I don't think that's going to happen. I said, yeah, well, who knows? If you do, give me a call. He gave me a call. So it'd be the same deal if you had a place in Mexico or Belize or wherever. It doesn't really matter. And you decide that you're not going to go. But let's say you had a niece or a nephew or something like that who didn't want to watch this out their front window. They wanted to watch it on their big screen TV, as Doug Casey says. And they're at a point in their life where they can avoid a 5-year storm as it blows through, and maybe different people are at different places in their life. You could extend that option to them. You could say, hey, I have this place. I got a bug out. I'm not going. I'm going to stay here because I'm needed. But if you want to go or you want to take your family or whatever, here's a place you can go. You'll be safe. There's food. There's a community. There's some gold there, maybe. Who knows? And when this blows over, you'll be in a good place to put your life together, regardless of what happens here. And so having those options is kind of neat. And not that it's something everybody should do, but those sort of options get you out of the fear reaction mentality, because you don't have to figure out how to make it work where you are. If things get weird enough where you are, it's like, yeah, I can't figure this out, so I'm going to leave.
Also, even if you never exercise those options, having that reduces your background stress load, and you will be able to respond to whatever's happening where you are a lot clearer, knowing that that's an option.
So okay, so
Yeah, that's great, guys.
that would be your main first point is that to not act out of fear, and act in a fashion such that you have diversification.
Set up it would be like this, and I think you've already done this to a large extent. I mean, I'm speaking kind of broadly. I'm speaking to myself too. It'd be to configure the material aspect of your life, so that it's robust. It's the anti-fragile idea, so that events that, I mean, these are not unexpected events for us, right? We've been talking about stuff like this for a long time, in particular an economic collapse.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, I'm here. You got me?
Oh, okay. Events
Okay.
that you were saying, events that
we are expecting, or at least have a reasonable probability of happening, right? Like, while this event is unusual, it's not as shockingly unexpected to us as it is to many of the people we know. In particular, the government's reaction here, right? So, given that we're in that category, how can we structure aspects of our material life to give us the maximum amount of buffer, so that when an event happens, we have something in reserve that lets us stop and sit down and take a deep breath and think, and maybe do some Skype calls with our friends and say, hey, what do you think's going on here? What do you think we should do? And not just dismiss it and say, well, nothing's going to happen, which is a fear response, or go into a total panic mode and say, oh, the world's ending, which is a fear response. But instead, to have the time and the option to sit down and talk and figure out a course of action.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, and I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago, David, we had a good example of that, where we were on the phone and we all had good options, and we were all able to exercise them and travel around and get to safe areas, safe spaces.
Yeah, it was a really good warm-up for something that has turned out to be not very dangerous.
Right.
But could have been.
Yeah, that was a really cool exercise, looking back on it, especially.
It's like Event 201.
Even
so,
David, when you're saying how to some of us it's not a surprise, I was even, Layla had something up here about, she was a doom and gloom writer. She would say something about how this might be here to take out old people, but I wouldn't doubt it a bit. It's not conspiracy theory to me. I mean, we've been talking about that for years too. And, even with the collapse, I don't want to act like it's a joyous occasion. On one side, it is. If the empire collapses, because it hurts and destroys so many people, it wouldn't be easy. But it is the preferred outcome that it would happen. But it would not. Look at the original revolution, right? I love that story. But it wasn't real neat for Nathan Hale when he got hanged. It wasn't real neat for the state cargoed by the British Navy. Life sucked there for them. It wasn't just run around with your musket and shoot redcoats. So even historically, it's not fun.
Right.
But it's to me, it has to happen. It's the preferable outcome, no matter how bad it is, because it's so bad the way it is. We're insulated. The rest of the world's not. I mean, if you live in Fallujah,
let me ask you this, though.
praying for.
I'm wondering, what do you see as far as as that goes? As the empire topples and things start to break down, etc. Earlier at the beginning of the show, Josh, you were making a mention of how we're probably going to be seeing an income tax and an increase in property taxes, etc. And and there was something else that you said might drop. They're going to use the Carlson Center for a shelter or something like that, and if we charge prices, our taxes might go down. Fat chance of that. But what I'm wondering is, as far as I know right now, real estate transactions are dead. That's not happening right now. But is that true or not? Do you know anything about that?
We were talking about that on our Friday show yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that. Is it really? Is it? Because if your house suddenly can't sell and has no value virtually to anyone on the market, how can they tax it at that rate?
That's what we were talking about. We're trying to figure that out. And what is going, because housing prices are just sort of frozen right now. I actually have a real estate dude in the area here where I'm in Canada, because I'm looking at a place for my business. And I am going to talk to him about this next week, because houses are still being sold and still closing. What they're doing is they're not viewings. The viewings have to be scheduled. So people are still viewing houses and closing on them and stuff like that. But I don't know what the impact is. And he has a big chart. Like if you know a realtor in your area, they'll have a big table of houses that have closed, and it'll show the list price and the closing price and the spread. And in a market that's going up, there's always a massive spread. The closing price is always way higher than the list. And I'm curious to see what the last few weeks have looked like for him, because that's gonna show us what the housing prices are gonna look like by the time the whole thing wraps up. But yeah, I don't know. How do they tax that? And when municipalities, we talked about this again yesterday too, when municipalities are deferring their tax deadline, are they going to reassess your property before this deferred tax deadline? If your property loses half its value, who knows? And then the other factor is, where do most property taxes go? They go to public schools. Well, public schools aren't open.
That's a good point.
So
may they never reopen.
May they never reopen. Except there's all the parents who actually don't have the budget or the time to do meal prep for their kids and stuff. Like there's all this stuff that's all woven together, and when one thread gets pulled out, the whole thing unravels. And the trap that we've been getting caught in our discussions this week and last week were, how do they glue it back together? We've been playing Humpty Dumpty, right? How does the government put a system that we know doesn't work back together? And the answer is, they can't really. All the king's horses and all the king's men. And that's what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So I think what we just saw is that, okay, so there's been structured economies that have been tried in the past, which are non-organic. They're top down. Here's the plan. We're going to build them. And I think, and that's in contrast to what we have, which is an organically built system. And I think what we just saw was the destruction of an organically built system, and there will be an attempt to, or rather, any attempt to force that system back into its previous existence will be necessarily a top-down planned system, because you can't rebuild an organically built system in a short period of time. It's just what was there, what had developed is now gone to some degree.
Yeah, I was reading a quote from Seneca about that. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it's something like how to build whatever it is, civilization, whatever, takes eons, and it is destroyed in minutes. And it just, the destruction is immediate, and and that's so true of everything, because we're always fighting against entropy and trying to create something, and it takes, our greatest creations have taken eons of people's lives, and vision and such, and now, I don't know, it just seems like that's on hold.
Yeah, I think
Or it's being destroyed.
Yeah, destruction happens easily.
Leonard Reed used to talk about that too. He talked about he was the FEE guy, Foundation for Economic Education or whatever. Ron Paul, huge.
Guy who wrote I Pencil or something like that.
Yep. And he gave a talk. Leonard Reed talk. He has a talk on YouTube that's just phenomenal. And it's something like how do you go about building this society, this peaceful society? Let me see if I can find it. Anyway, the thing that he talked about, how to advance liberty. I'm going to post it in the comments right now. The thing that he talked about was, if you want to train somebody on how to kill another person, it's pretty easy. You give them a gun or a knife or something, and you show them how to use it. And then they use it, and it's easy. And you've made someone who can kill someone else. You've trained someone how to kill. Pretty easy. You could do it in like a day or less. Then he says, okay, I want you to think about what it would take to train somebody or to teach somebody how to write great poetry. Like, how long would that take? How much effort would it take? Sometimes it's not even possible. There's an innate aspect to it, or a painter, or even like to weld really well, even the trades. And it was the same point you made. All of these productive things, all these generative things take a lot of effort and time to put together, and the destruction can happen quickly. But once it's destroyed, it's gone. And I think one of the traps that people are going to get stuck in, that we probably shouldn't get stuck in, is trying to restore, trying to make America great again.
Yeah.
Because whatever is coming is going to be new and different. There's no going back. And so it's all about ways forward, and not forgetting the past, because we're going to get to restructure stuff. But there's no unwinding this legislation. There's no repealing it. There's no going back to a world where the government doesn't get people to stay in their homes. That's gone. So figuring out what we do going forward. And that's the action side of it, which is where libertarians have been radically weak in their personal action. And we have a real opportunity here to navigate this better than most everybody else. We just need to make sure that we seize it.
Yeah. Well, I know that personally for me, being of an anarchist bent, that, I have a hard time doing anything that has we involved in it. So that has always been a stickler for me. I tend to want to, do everything individually, and it kind of goes along with this, the way I was raised, with John Wayne, and you go out and you do things the manly way. You don't ask for help, that type of thing. And so, and that, I just think that goes along with that, what they call a rugged individualism, and that's something I guess you got to get over. And to me, that's always been the most frustrating dichotomy about the freedom movement, is that it requires collectivism in order to succeed.
Well, one of the fun things that we've experienced through this, and that we're experiencing now with you, is like Corey and Josh and I, and Josh in Seattle, and a couple other people. We've been checking in with each other a couple times a week, sometimes on YouTube and sometimes just through like group chat and stuff like that. Just sanity checking. And we've all been making our own decisions. Because, like, the problem isn't information. The problem is, what do you do with the information? And so we've all been making our own decisions.
The problem is too much information.
Totally. We've all been making our own little decisions about what to do, and different people have been doing different things about this, and so we've still been acting as individuals, but we've been doing that with the discussion that comes from community. So it hasn't been collectivist per se, but it hasn't just been I'm going to go off and do my thing and make my own decisions either. And that's been really neat. And we've been able to do that without all being in the same place and without all reaching a consensus. And it's been a good example of, I think, what we can continue to do going forward, because we're still at the beginning of the whole thing. Like 2020 is going to be a year that's beyond weird. And I think we're still in like the first 10% of it.
Sure seems to be shaping up that way. That is for sure. I didn't see it coming in, I never saw any of this coming, in January or whatever, even in February, just not that long ago. And it was like when they first started doing it, and we had our Monday morning meeting at work, and we had, I had people that I work with who I thought were totally rational people going, oh my God, we're going to die. Well, they didn't maybe go that far, but it was like, I'm so glad the government is doing something. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I couldn't believe that in my own ranks at work, it was that way. And then this last week, I was told, they didn't say it directly to me, but I know that's who it was meant for. I was told that now is not the time to be worrying about your rights.
Oh, yeah.
In the meeting, it said, this is the time we need to be worrying about our rights. The very time we need to be worrying about our rights. I couldn't, they think I'm a kook at work, basically, because I insist on that kind of thing. And,
Rick. That's why we love you.
I was blown away by it, though, that my own coworkers, and they're young people. They're relatively young people. It's like, you have nothing to fear from this virus. You'll have, maybe a sniffle and a cough, and and then that'll be that. Well, I don't want to give it to anyone else. And it's like, well, then don't go around anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Rick, your rights are a privilege for when times are good.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's another thing. I'm getting up close to retirement age anyway, so I tend to speak my mind a lot more in company meetings and stuff like that. And I'm stunned by what people are willing to accept from government. It's there's no questioning of any kind, and I just I fear for our country and for the people in it. As well, I have selfish things going on there too, because it's like all I want to do is be left alone. And now it's like the ultimate, I can't be left alone, deal,
While you're told to be alone.
Well, yeah, now you're told to be alone, which I don't mind. I mean, because I'm kind of a, loner type person anyway, that's part of that individual thing too, I've always enjoyed, like sports, like snowshoeing and stuff like that, kind of, those are, you do that pretty much alone. I do it alone all the time, and greatly enjoy that. And I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I do think it's important, for us, of somewhat like mind, as Dave said. We don't have to be in total agreement, but to stay in touch, and sanity check. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, as far as being alone, I think a lot of libertarians in America, at least, when they heard the shelter at home, don't be around other people, probably went, yes, my lifestyle legitimized.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, well, hey guys, I'm going to go. I got to get off the phone. I'll continue to listen, but I've got to run it. Really enjoyed talking to you, and keep up the efforts. Hey, is this going to be your permanent format going forward? Do you think, or what's the plan?
I think so. I mean, we can't get into the station right now, and this is starting to gain steam. So to the extent that more people who are listening now kick it out over social media, and it gains a little bit more momentum, this is a great format.
Okay. Yeah, I can't help you much there because I took my Facebook down, my Facebook platform down. I decided I just didn't want to do that anymore.
That's probably a good move. That's probably a good move. Word of mouth, even just word of mouth, people like, hey, there's this YouTube stream. These guys are talking about coronavirus or whatever. All that stuff makes a difference.
All right. Well, I will definitely do whatever I can to forward it. So you guys take care.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the call, Rick.
Bye, Rick.
Talk to you. Bye.
I'm going to kick the number out on the live chat again. I think we got
775-525-0924.
Yes, that is it. We are into our second hour, if we were keeping track.
I just looked too.
Yeah. We had, on the agenda for hour 2 is all of the oil permanent funds, money spending stuff for the state of Alaska. Like, the state could easily go broke during this time for many reasons. One is like doling out money to everybody, and the other is that price of oil's totally collapsed, and the slope is like, rolling up the carpet right now. So we talked about this a little bit during the week with the likelihood, in fact, of depleting the PFD, so there's no dividend anymore, and the state going hand to mouth with income tax and sales tax. Plus, there's the other, it's third hour stuff, but there's the collapse of tourism in the state too. So what do you guys think about that, in particular with oil and the state's reserves?
I think I got to take a 2-minute break.
My first thought on that was Airbnbs, because we had been talking much about your cabin, and the place that I'm in now was slated to go on in January, February, and I'm not sure what the Airbnb status is, but I'm sure it's down everywhere a lot, except for some cases where people are not able to get back to their normal homes. So it'd be interesting to get some data from Airbnb and VRBO and see what their bookings are looking like, because that would be a pretty good indicator. But I imagine in general tourism is just going to be completely non-existent this year.
Yeah, I had a couple Airbnb guests lined up, and all of them canceled.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm empty right now. And airlines basically aren't flying right now.
Right. You'd have to put 2 weeks on whatever booking you were gonna, whatever your original travel plan was, because you have to do quarantine now, or self-isolation. As soon as you land in the airport, you have to say where you will be, and you cannot make any other stops before you go to that place. So,
yeah, and
you get food and stuff is unclear.
Exactly. I have a guy, a friend of mine, staying in my place in Alaska right now, who got stuck there. He is from the States, and he actually just sent me a text and said, "Do you know of any good delivery services in Fairbanks?" So yeah, so I'm going to work to help him out with that. But yeah, it's even if you can travel, it's a pain, and yeah, like you're saying, minimum 2 weeks. So yeah, tourism's nuked, which is funny because oil revenue is nuked. If the state went to the original pitch for a sales tax in Alaska was to do a seasonal sales tax, so tourists would pay most of the sales tax. Right? That was always the pitch for sales tax when I was a kid, anyway. And now there's not going to be any tourism in 2020. Even after this is over, people are going to be super spooked about travel in general. So even if it ended next week or something, there's going to be very little tourism. It's like, when's the next time people are going to go on cruise ships? It's not anytime soon. So the sales tax will be on Alaskans.
Yeah. I was thinking a better model for cruise ships going forward might be some kind of seasteading thing where people are there long term, and when they arrive at the ship, they have to go into, a quarantine area for some period of time, and then once they get a clean bill of health, then they can live on the ship for 6 months or whatever, and then it never reaches port. It just floats around in the ocean.
That's more like a timeshare type thing with a little bit of an isolation thing. Yeah. But yeah, with oil down, what do you think is going on with oil long term here, Josh? What do you like? Is this the Russians? I mean, Corey, you sent some stuff about this too. Is this the Russian Saudi thing? How long can the price stay down like this? I suppose there's no demand right now.
Yeah, it's supply and demand. That's the thing, that we're in a weird market because supply and demand both went down together, and it's not clear how you restart that pump.
And there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on, like you kind of mentioned between Russia, OPEC, fracking in America, the oil sands and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of geopolitical stuff that's keeping the price down, trying to force certain American industries out of business. And I mean, I honestly think that this is just going to end up being a war, end up having some kind of a war to boost oil again, really. And I hate to think that way, but
call her on.
If no one's, using the oil, you can't drive. I mean, we've all seen the satellite pictures of the ozone and the pollution and everything around the world. There is none right now. No one's doing anything.
Yep. Traffic is stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned on the slope a couple of the big companies up there that had several billion-dollar projects lined up for the next 5 years. They've suspended them, some of them completely. And some of them they've cut back even this year. We're looking at 2 to 3 months of really hard freight hauling up there still. And now everyone's told maybe another month because they've cut that much off. And you guys know about an agreement I was working on that it was supposed to be for 5 to 10 years. And now it's on hold indefinitely. Won't know for another couple weeks before. They're as caught off guard probably as we are.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't plan spending $5 billion in the next 2 years, knowing that they weren't going to spend it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the material's already here, but they're not accepting it. Just putting on the brakes. And I thought that we wouldn't see it as much because most of this stuff is a lot of it's exploration. getting fields online, getting them ready to come online. And normally they don't shut those down. They shut down, they back off on maybe drill a new well or something like that till prices come back up. But exploration, when fuel's cheap, it's cheap to explore. Because on the North Slope, all the fuel has to be hauled up there. They're getting it for a big time discounted rate right now. That has to be a huge, tens of millions of gallons of fuel go up on the North Slope. Millions and millions of gallons of fuel from Fairbanks, Valdez, and Anchorage all go up there. And they're getting a really discounted rate right now. And they're still shutting down exploration even. So that's kind of concerning. That shows a little bit, there's deeper underlier, I think, is what that shows. Because that's not what normally, I've been here 20 some years, so I haven't followed it for 90 years. But from what I've seen since I've lived here, they don't usually cut back like this. Not for those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Not the long-term stuff like that.
Right.
We got a call. Let's bring him on.
Oh, cool.
Hello, caller.
Hey, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Well, hey, I'm glad you guys are up, and I thought you just brought up a couple interesting points that I'd like to kind of war game on the state budget. If you guys were in the executive branch, what would you be doing to balance the budget going forward, given that tourism and oil simultaneously have basically collapsed?
Yeah. The only way to do it would be massive cuts and drawing down. I think if you stopped paying the dividend, if you suspended the dividend, that would give the state a couple years of budget reserve. So you could extend the following offer to the taxpayers in November or whatever. You could say, okay, either we are going to suspend the dividend and bind ourselves to no property or no sales or income tax for 2 years or whatever, or we will continue to pay out the dividend and we will begin an income tax or sales tax immediately. That's how I would, if I were in charge, so to speak, I would present that to the voters. Or a third option, we're going to cut services massively. A, B, C, pick.
C.
Right. People would be able to dig their own. They'd be able to dig their own hole.
Yeah, because it's like one of those don't ever let a crisis go to waste situations. But on the positive side, flip side of the coin is that given the predicament, I don't see the welfare state continuing unless the progressive left get the massive taxation option, which it seems like, it just from my view, normies and conformies are tapped out and probably could not even take the additional burden for an average household. So if we go the cut the fat route, you're going to have a lot of, if you go the plow the roads, issue driver's licenses, I don't know, some other stuff that we can all kind of sort of agree that we don't mind as much. And then everything else is out the window. And then you have permanent fund money, and that's a big debate. And then you have maybe some incentive programs, maybe some stuff, some land options for people to, buy the state out on certain things, open up some land to generate revenues. But it's exciting in that way. If you guys are following where I'm going, it's like, okay, we've been complaining about all this waste and abuse and welfare and talking about how eventually people will get fed up and we won't, the producers will be overwhelmed by a parasitic class, and then to use some harsh terminology. But now it's like, well, clearly something must change. So it'd be hard to be. I don't know if I envy the governor's position of power here to make those choices, because no one's going to be happy. There's definitely going to be a large group of unhappy people at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's the game of being, this is something we talked about a little earlier. It's the game of being in charge of a system that can't go on. It's not a regenerative system, it's a degenerative one. And whoever's in charge at the end has no way of keeping it together.
David, you missed a fourth option, which is deplete the permanent fund, cut services, and then raise taxes.
Yes, which is what they will do.
My prediction.
So,
All of the above.
so the to your point, the caller's point about normies and conformies, which I love. That's an amazing term. They can't be bled anymore. You've seen the Fed this week talking about how they can just issue money forever in an unlimited form. And did you also see that there is zero reserve requirement on banks anymore? There's none. There's no reserve requirement. Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So it appears they're not going to use taxation to fund this. They're just going to print money.
David, it's interesting you said that, because I had one more question, and I'll let you guys go, and that was it, is if they just print, so, okay, we've got this $4 trillion thing going on, you guys are Austrian school, you're economically well-versed, that when they create money, helicopter money, that reduce the purchasing power of your money. So the savers are punished, or the people that are holding cash, especially, that are not getting the discount window from the Fed, not big banks, not corporations, households that are not in debt will be the losers, because your purchasing power will just simply be diminished. So question is, assuming we can't stop this, which we can't, it's already passed, and assuming this is coming with the money supply issue, what would you be putting your cash or your money or your liquidity into currently to hedge? And I know gold is a pretty standard answer, but I mean, what are some just creative thoughts any of you guys have had about how to avoid this tidal wave that's coming in?
Gold, silver, crypto.
Yep.
Simple. I am in all three of those. And I am not worried about the tidal wave. Another thing we've talked about is to answer your question more specifically, because I kind of avoided it. We have been discussing on some of our weekday shows what sort of traditional investment assets would work in a time of inflation, and property came up. We had a discussion about property yesterday on our little economic show, and property maybe, but probably certain types of property definitely not, like urban multi-unit rentals. No, for sure not. But warehousing, farmland, yeah, rural, exactly, productive rural land, and warehousing is one that I brought up a couple times that I'm still looking into, because those are necessary. They're necessary, and they're participants in the economy. You're not just like, gold's not an investment; it's a inflation hedge, but it doesn't yield anything. But the types of land like Corey's talking about, or warehousing, supply chain buffer type investments, those are likely to do well. For one, everybody's spooked about the supply chain right now. And regardless of inflation, it's the rising tide lifts all ships. So if you're invested in the productive part of the economy, which has to continue, that's sort of an intrinsic inflation hedge as well. So those are a couple ideas. Buying gold through a crypto exchange is really super cool. I'm actually not super keen on physical gold. I'm not as keen on physical gold as I was, or physical silver, because when you actually want to buy it or sell it, it's challenging. Like silver dipped to $11 last week. And the only way that you could buy it at $11 was if you bought it electronically. So having some cash in a investment account where you can snatch up an ETF is not probably the worst idea in the world.
Except getting that money back out if banks are not functioning.
Yeah, that's true. If it gets super, and that's where a crypto commodity exchange is way cool. You can buy gold and silver with some tokens that are physically tied to the price of the physical asset through DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. So like Digix is one of them, and there's a couple other gold tokens. So that way you get the electronic speed of purchase, which is cool. And you get to exchange and trade quickly, but you're outside of the banking system. You still run into the problem of how do you take physical delivery if you want it, and how do you cash your crypto out into fiat. But if things get super weird, if things get so weird that you can't get your money into or out of a bank, the likelihood that you'll be able to just buy it with some cryptocurrency is pretty high. Like the emergence of crypto pay will probably go way up. So anyway.
It's interesting that you mentioned Digix. That's one of the original precious metal DAO, or crypto-backed precious metal exchanges, and I looked into them pretty extensively, and they do have vaults. I believe one is in Canada. I think it's either Hong Kong. I think they're actually headquartered in Singapore, but they've got like Switzerland, a couple of the big, like 5 or 6 locations where you can allegedly go in and make that exchange happen with your token, and they actually have proven reserves. So they actually were a storage vault before they went into crypto. So they do have precious metal, and then all of it's just been tokenized, and that's what you're getting, and then you can make it physical. But I agree with you that in a really situation where you can't go in, I've seen YouTube videos where people have used sat phones to move Bitcoin, because when you really think about it, you just need a dial-up speed, a real slow connection to push the transaction through with the keys. And so what I'm trying to make is that quite a bit of infrastructure can go down before your crypto goes down, and then at some point you have bigger problems than whether or not you can move something on a blockchain if the whole internet backbone infrastructure servers are down. But when I saw the video where he was using sat phones, so satellite communication, to move it, a lot of people write it off. They just aren't aware that it's that complex, or that it's that advanced, I guess I should say. They just assume that it's kind of funny money on the internet, and they haven't really looked into these things. But I appreciate farmland. I really like that comment too, because I would say for myself, I'm into the same things as you guys, but the productive industries and farming stuff is kind of what I've been looking into now, because that's going to be a big part of the future no matter what happens. So good show, guys. I'll let someone else get on and keep going.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for the call.
I want
Two quick thoughts on that. One of the things I would like to have is a CNC machine, because there's just a lot of stuff you can make, and not complex stuff, but it's part of if I think there'll be a move towards being something like community production, just like food is grown locally, and I think this will help local relationships, and where you're where all the stuff you need is coming from. The other thought on that was you can do digital transmission over ham radio, and I'm sure somebody's done it where they do some kind of Bitcoin transaction over a regular radio or through a relay. The only thing with that is encryption is not allowed on on the public bands. So
There are
Except in Alaska.
allowed. A bunch of blockchains can be broken and then locally authenticated or authenticated on subnetworks, and then the networks can be remerged later. Like you just you re-authenticate all the transactions that have happened to make sure they're all valid. But because the calculations are deterministic, a number of blockchains can be decoupled and then recoupled later on. So that's always a possibility.
so it can be a somewhat asynchronous.
You can have it. Yeah, you can have You can have a network broken and then asynchronously connect it back up and validate everything.
What about price changes during that time? And that's a different topic.
Yeah, well, the tokens, the tokens exchange value might be different in different places, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I don't know. The other fun thing about crypto is like you can't really filter it out of the rest of the network traffic, and it rides on the same network that all the propaganda rides on. Like the idea of the internet takedown, people talk about it, but yeah, maybe not. I mean, if the internet went down, if you have 2 billion people being told to stay in their houses and they don't have Netflix and propaganda being spewed into their house, how long do they stay in their house? I don't know.
10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, right, maybe. Yeah, they'll go outside to try to get better reception on their phone, like for one.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's a possibility, but it seems remote to me. But that could be wishful thinking on my part.
Well, they're kind of showing it in China. We saw some stuff in China yesterday that how they react. They're pushing back. Before we go on, I want to go back to something the caller said real quick. He was talking about the parasitic class is in welfare recipients, and I used to hold that view a lot more, but over time I don't so much anymore. The state is the parasitic class. The state elite are the parasitic class. And I kind of got that idea from Ron Paul, just listening to him, studying the stuff he wrote and talked to us about even on the show. People on welfare, they're not all of them are just bums that don't want to work. And a lot of them are there because of different government intervention. Even the bums that don't want to work, they're getting a paycheck, but they're being allowed to doesn't want to work by the parasitic class called the state. The state's the one that takes our money and spends it, not the welfare recipient. The welfare recipient doesn't actually steal. I mean, in a way, sure. But it's the state parasites that do all that. And, he said something about the far left, agenda of welfare for everyone and stuff, not being an option because there's no money or whatever without taxation and whatnot. All the politicians are leftist. They're all socialist. I mean, look at Dunleavy. He started out with, I'm cutting services, I'm cutting the budget, this and this. This coronavirus thing comes up. We need $1 billion bailout plan, and we need to give everyone another welfare check or a dividend of $1,400. We need, and I'm going to take $1 billion and $1.5 billion from the federal government. All the politicians in Washington, D.C. that are conservative right wingers be put into action immediately. $6 trillion is not enough. We need to start on the new bill now. They're all leftist socialist. They are the political class, the parasitic class. It's not us. But there's no left-right dichotomy. They're all leftist socialist. All of them are. I just want to say that.
This has been fun because it's been Berwick on one of his more recent videos. He was talking about, it might not have been Berwick. It doesn't matter. There was a guy I was watching on YouTube, and he was talking about this this playwright or poet or something, and he wrote about it might have been Carlin or something. Anyway, he wrote about there being this play, and the play was about a society where everyone is free, and the American population is the audience, and the play that's happening on the stage it's a set, right? And it has all these things, and it looks like it's free. This is a little bit like the Truman Show. And as long as everything's good, the play goes on, and everybody in the audience feels like they're immersed in this world of freedom. But then when things aren't good, the director of the play stops the play, and they remove all the sets, and all that's there is a brick wall that surrounds the audience and backstops the stage as well, because everyone's inside of a brick building with no escape. Which is a little bit like the Truman Show for people who have seen that movie.
Isn't that a play on Plato's allegory of the cave, where you're chained in a cave and you see shadows on the wall and you think it's reality, and then when the guy gets out and then he sees the world, and when he comes back and he tries to tell the other people in the cave, they kill him.
It's a little bit like that. It is a little bit like that. Yep. It is a little like that. So that's what's happening right now. Like, to Josh's point, that's what's happening right now. Is like the situation is just weird enough for everybody to reveal who they really are right now. And it's not that weird. Like, the situation isn't like actually that bad. And everybody's falling over themselves to see who's more socialist.
Yeah, I was talking with my dad yesterday, and we were talking about the kind of nature of this event, and we brought up a couple other scenarios. One would be like an impending asteroid. Like there's I can't think of anything else that would synchronize what's going on around the whole world, right? Everybody is affected by this. Just like in the case of some high probability of an impact, but even an impact is going to hit one side of the planet harder than the other. Same with the solar flare. One side will be left, okay, and the other, whoever's facing the sun when it happens, is game over. So it's also a sustained. It's not a single event. It's a continuous unfolding that affects everyone.
That's that's a funny example, the solar flare one. One of the reasons for a lot of bug out people to live in the southern hemisphere is that the prevailing winds around the world keep most nuclear fallout in the northern hemisphere. And they're like, it's a practical consideration. But the way most people approach like a nuclear war is, well, we're all screwed, but not everyone is equally screwed. Yeah, interesting point. Our other topics for we're now in our third hour. Our other topics for the show include the impact on tourism of this, which is Alaska's other big. We talked about oil a little bit. Tourism's the other big one, and the broader economy. And then also one of our favorite topics is the Jones Act. And so in a post-COVID-19 Alaska, where tourism's been decimated, oil prices are non-existent, the PFD, the permanent fund itself has been liquidated. Does this finally create an environment where we can agree to get rid of the Jones Act, and where Murkowski and Sullivan and Don Young get their heads out of their butts and actually do something good for the state?
Wow. I just thought about something. Could it be coincidence that when Patriots Lament started talking about the Jones Act, this COVID-19 fiasco started? Just to give the government a reason to get rid of the Jones Act and not give us the credit for it.
That's what's going on, dude.
They knew it couldn't be stopped, so they had to cover it. Yeah.
Had to cover it up. Wow. I'm running with that one for sure. I think I'll write the guys at Cato right now and let them know. Mission accomplished. Sorry.
Yeah.
We all have conspiratorial minds, though. We think
No, exactly. No, but like, what do you guys actually think I mean, imagine, so let's picture Alaska 2020 is only, we're only 3 months in. It's only 25% of the way through. So, things will continue to get weird. And like all these programs that have just been passed or that are being enacted now, we're just talking about them. The effects of these haven't even been felt yet. And so this is going to play out over the year if things are not good now, they're going to be much worse as these programs start to play out. And so what do you guys see Alaska looking like in the fall, and does this create an environment where there can be some real change in Alaska, or do Alaskans just pull for more socialism? Like, instead of saying, hey, maybe we should get rid of the Jones Act, do Alaskans just ask for more federal aid or something like that?
Short term, I'd say more socialism.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to predict the future when we're talking about individual actors. And I think that's the one thing I've learned over the last few years, one from it and the other, Richard Mayberry, because I remember asking him once before, like, how come in 2008 it didn't collapse the system? Rawr. All of the models, our Austrian models, say that this can't keep going. How come it did? Because we're dealing with individual actors. We don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what your neighbor's going to do. And the one thing that you taught me, Dave, was that along those lines is the thing we assume is going to happen, we expect it to happen immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And while it certainly is going to happen, it may not be immediately. But back to your point more, I think socialism short term, for sure. Whether there's any freedom that comes out on the other end, a long road to hoe on that one. We're already seeing more socialism right now. And you're absolutely right. The checks aren't coming in the mail for another 3 weeks to a month. So we're just getting started on this one, baby. And they're already planning phase 2 of the bailout. More money's coming. Can you imagine Alaskans? Let's bring it home here. And let's say that people on unemployment get $350, $400, something like that a week. This thing that they just passed from the federal government, they're going to get another $650 to $700 a week on their unemployment. And they're going to get $1,200 per married couple. So $2,400 plus $500 a kid. And Alaska wants to give them a $1,400 dividend. You're talking about households with all of a sudden $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 cash money infusion. They're not going to go buy gold with it. They're going to go, woohoo! They're going to freak out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's and what has always been their response to these things is more. Education system sucks. Well, it doesn't have enough money. Why else have they gotten rid of the reserves? Required reserves. Why else do they tell the Federal Reserve you can print as much as you want? Because that's exactly what they're going to do. That's, I think, why we assume that this might be the final nail in the coffin, because they're pulling out all the reserves to make it work, to rebuild it. And we know that that's not the way it's going to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Alaskans are real socialists, man. They're all pretty tough, individual, rugged people until you start threatening their dividend. Then they'll knife you in the back. That's
Don't
our
tread on my
money.
socialism.
Yeah, that's
That's
right. That's right. Keep your laws off my socialism. Or I'll pass a law.
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Uh,
And if the oil market collapses more, I mean, 3 years ago for 2015, so it's been 5. There was about a 3-year dip here on the oil industry. And I know literally dozens of guys that had to give up their trucks. They moved out of the state. Businesses went out of business. And, what were the headlines on the state news was, woe is us, woe is us. Do we need an income tax? Should we have a sales tax? And this is that on steroids. I mean, that was back when oil was still in the $50 range. We're at 20. That's a kick in the teeth. No matter what they say, oil runs the state. I mean, gold's pretty cool, the mining sectors and all that, but I have to imagine that Alaska is just like the rest of the United States too. 75% of the economy is consumption, and there's nothing to consume.
Right.
I
There's
don't
nothing
think it's any
from
different
this.
here.
I'd like to see a breakdown of when the PFD is released. People go buy stuff. How long does if you track all that money, how fast does it flow out of the state? Right, because nothing's manufactured here. So if you buy goods, only a small percent is staying, as profit for whoever's selling the goods, but most of it just flies away, goes out of the state.
Well, when I was mentioning they're not going to go buy gold and silver. They're going to do what I'm thinking about doing when the show's over, going to measure the corner of my wall over there, see how big of a TV I can actually fit in there. That's what they're going to do.
Isn't that what was said after 9/11 when people said, what should we do? And somebody said, go shopping.
George Herbert Walker Bush said that, yeah, the most patriotic thing you can do is go buy stuff.
Keep shopping. Don't worry about things. Keep going. Life is normal. George Bush, come out with your hands up.
Yeah. We have a caller on hold.
Oh, sorry.
Let's bring him on. Caller, you are on air.
What's up, brothers?
What's going on?
Hey.
Oh, man. I'm trying to just simplify everything. There's just too much to make sense of or figure out what's coming, this or that. So, but simply and in simple terms, what do y'all think's coming? More control or less?
More.
Well, you don't get
Much.
less without more until it flies off the rails. So.
Excellent point.
Calculating this and that, and for me, it's interesting, and I love listening, and I definitely get more ideas and help get dots connected and stuff like that. So it's great, but at the end of the day, the decision is: am I going to live with more control, or try to get away from it? So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm going to try to get away from it. And I'm thinking, if I can't, that maybe the best thing I can do is be an example to my children and maybe other people, or to not acquiesce. I'm not saying fight. I'm not saying be violent. But just refuse. Just say no. No, you're not going to take my liberties. I'm not going to live like a slave. I mean, I've already been living like a slave, but I guess it was just enough slavery that it was tolerable. But what I think is coming is going to be intolerable. And what are y'all's thoughts on that?
What does no look like for you?
If it's just me, no looks like a 3-year-old spoiled little brat in a grocery store, just sits down, folds his arms up, and I ain't moving, right? And if you want to take me somewhere, you're going to have to drag me, right? If it's just
your mask on.
If it's just me, I can do that. I've done that before when I was 3. But and since then, if I don't think I'm built in a way, as much as I try to adhere to the non-aggression principle, as much as I try to adhere to the golden rule, I don't think I'm really built to where I can stand around and watch like old ladies or people like that get abused. That's why I purposely never went to mass protest or something like that, because I don't think I could contain myself if I was to see a cop, blast some old lady or some innocent, or, mace or this or that. I don't think I can contain myself. I mean, I get, when you watch documentaries of the 60s or, documentaries of, protest and the abuses and stuff like that, I don't think I could have contained myself. I don't think I could just sit idly by and watch somebody get cracked over the skull with a billy club or something. So that's just the way I'm built. But if it's just me, I think I can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I don't know how to answer your question. I don't know what it looks like for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you shouldn't stand there with an old woman gets abused.
As angry as I am with politicians and stuff like that, and as criminal and evil as I think they are, I still don't want to harm any of them. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's I don't think it's logical, and I don't think it's moral, and I don't think it helps. I don't think violence helps. So in my heart of hearts, as disgusted and repulsed as I am, I guess the most violence they would ever have to worry out of me is a fist fight, But I don't want that, I just want to be left alone. But it doesn't look like they're going to leave us alone. So, and I certainly don't want, I don't know, my thinking is, like you said, they started pulling on that string, or it's going to unravel now, or maybe this is the first domino in a line. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse, the ripple effect, and then the effect from that effect, and then the effect from that effect. As long as there's people in this world who think they can control everything and that they know everything and that everyone's supposed to follow, we know from history, the Stalins, the Maos, we know from history what the effects and the byproduct and the consequences of that is. And this is no different. This is no different than a Mao's Great Leap Forward, or Stalin, saying, "Oh, you farmers can't farm anymore." This is no different than that. And if it is, and somebody please tell me how.
It's different because Trump said the most patriotic thing you can do is this, and so that's what makes it different.
That's probably what Mao said too.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. But he didn't say it in English.
So material-wise, I don't know. I think in some ways I'm mentally more prepared than a lot of people are. I've been practicing minimalism for a while, so I actually love it. It feels so great to be light. It feels so great to be free, not chained down with stuff and then the worries about the stuff and, you know, the maintenance of the stuff and everything that comes with it. So all the conversations as far as going along is, how are we going to keep our stuff? You know, I think that just enslaves, or I think that's just keeping people enslaved. And I'm not saying that to be like anti-property by, you know, I'm extremely property rights. But at the same time, if I can't have it, if I can't have a house and be left alone, then I'd rather not have a house because I prefer being left alone, right? If I can't have a house and I got these people pointing guns at me, give me your money or we'll take your house or this or that, then I don't want it. I just don't want it. Fine. You know, so I'm not like really worried about my quality of life per se. I'm more worried about my children's future and what that looks like moving forward. And I don't think acquiescing and saying nothing is going to stop socialism or what's coming. You know, I mean, I think good people are going to have to speak up. This is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This is seriously wrong. And you don't have to like what I say. That's okay. But we should, you know, definitely talk about it, definitely reason with one another about it, but that's not even going to happen unless us people who are not going along, who don't agree with us, start speaking up. You know, I talk to strangers all the time down here because I'm just traveling. And 9 out of 10, easily 9 out of 10 of people that I've talked to from all demographics, right? All of them. Hey, what do you think about what's going on? What do you think about this craziness? Every one of them, this is crazy. This is weird. The government's up to something. This is disproportionate response. Talk about normies. The normies knows what's up right now. The normies are talking about economics. Hey, man, if there's no products going on the shelves because nobody's working, then how's there going to be more?
Mm-hmm.
Right? See, the normies are getting it. 9 out of 10. Every day I talk to 2 or 3 different people. It could be the cleaning lady at the hotel room. It could be a guy I opened the door for, you know, at the grocery store or something like that. Just random people. For a whole month now, or since this started, 2 weeks, solid. Hey, what do you think of all this craziness? My kids, all of them. This is crazy. And I got one kid that's married to a police officer in Fairbanks. And when I was talking to her, he jumped in on the phone and said, man, this is all unconstitutional. This is so crazy. So there's at least one Fairbanks police officer for y'all that realizes that this ain't right. But not saying anything's not going to help. I guess some of us are just going to have to get our skulls cracked.
Or not, like you're saying. Or not. You know, you're saying you throw this idea out among normal people, and they're like, yeah, this does seem weird.
What I would say what's new about what's happening now, whereas in the past, so like World War I happened and there was radio, but it wasn't real popular. World War II happened, and for the first time, a leader could talk to the entire country at once, whereas before it was, you know, as far as a bullhorn could reach or a speaker system. And what's changed since the last, well, I wouldn't say that's the last major conflict, but one of the developments that's happened is what we're doing right now is where small groups are able to talk to each other and work this out and describe what we're all seeing to each other, and it's not it's many to many, it's not top down, so that the communication flow, well, there's a lot of noise, and there's, I think like what Rick was saying was that there's too much information, or there can be too much information. If you're able to sort it, you're not you're not stuck in the narrative of the propaganda as much.
Not stuck in the narrative. Yep.
I've shut it off.
People,
I've shut it off.
yeah,
Little tidbits. Updates and sending me texts.
people with cell phones that have cameras on them is a form of revolution in itself.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I want to go
Right.
back to what you first
It
said,
was a
Scott.
massive attack on liberty. Where it came from, how it started, who's involved, blah, 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 the whole response. If it's genuine or creator, this or that, the outcome is the same. This was a massive and devastating attack on freedom. People are locked in their homes. They're in house arrest. I mean, if there was any doubt if we're prisoners in the United States of America or not, this should answer the question. We're all prisoners. And when the wardens say, get back in your cell, people got to get back in their cell.
Yeah, the precedent's very interesting. Yes, the precedent is the significant part. And there are a lot of people who have opted to stay home for reasons. And then there are people who are doing it. Like, the reason that people are doing it, I think, is important too. Like, there are people who have opted to do it, and then there are people who are doing it because they were told to. And it's a little bit like that question Corey asked Rick. What would you do if the government ordered you to do something that you were doing anyway, or that you thought was the right thing to do?
And there's probably people who would do it themselves, but now because they're told to, they are, and that's kind of where I was going with that question, is as soon as you're told not to do something, even if it's something that you think is a good idea, you're now going to do the opposite, just so that you're not following. So, and that's where you get put in a real conundrum, because you're going against what, right? Your values are conflicting, and
So some of my
I'm not there. I'm in a pretty good area geographically. Stores, people haven't freaked out. Stores got plenty of food. You can still get toilet paper. I was eating in restaurants like a day ago. I was eating in a restaurant. But I kind of expected this from the federal government. I guess I had unanswered questions. I knew the federal government was like this, but I'm blown away by the governors. I am absolutely blown away. And of course it rubs me wrong because they're just people. And I don't recognize their right or any authority whatsoever how one person can tell another person what to do, where to go, where you can't go, if you can shop, if you can work, if you can this, if you can that. Absolutely blown away. I thought the federal government was bad, and they are. But, I mean, just like Dunleavy himself and these other governors, oh my, dude, I ain't never seen anything like that in my life. And it is unacceptable that any human being or other group of human beings think that they have authority or control over other human beings. It's ridiculous.
When you started off, Scott, you asked if it would get worse before it got better or better before it got worse. And you commented on being surprised at how easily people just follow orders. And again, I want to go back to China. They've lived under communism for 50, 60, 70 years. And from what we can see, they've always followed it, right? You think, how could they live under such a totalitarian regime? And they just put up with it. Then, even for a communist, it got worse. They had to shelter in place for 3 months, 2 months. They couldn't go to work for a couple months. They couldn't support their family for a couple months. And then they got told, okay, you can go back to work. So they, this is mainland China too. This isn't like Hong Kong. And people in mainland China were flipping over cop cars because another cop said, no, you can't go to work. We're not going to let you in here and work. And they said, we're coming anyways. So even communists, they even had something that was worse than communism. And while it might not be better, the reaction's amazing to see that happen there. It's amazing to see a group of Chinese people flipping over cop cars and beating up cops. They don't do that there. That's not Chile, where they do it on a normal, it's just a weekend out on town. That's communist China. So even as bad as it was, it got worse. And maybe this could seriously, we haven't really talked about it, but I've thought about it, and you guys probably have, this could be the end of the communist Chinese regime. It could blow up on them big time. That would be massive. And maybe Americans got to, even Americans, while they're all marching into their cattle cars or locking down in their homes, I think even Americans have a pushover point where they say, no more. We're not putting up with that. Oh, nice.
I think that's going to be when they're not able to buy any more groceries, or when well, the last place I was in Mississippi, and you could go to restaurants. This just a week ago. You could still go to restaurants. Maybe half of them were closed down. You could get the delivery. Grocery store open all different times. I got there at the Walmart. There's plenty. There's plenty, right? It's like, man, it's not happening here. And then I went there every day. I live in a hotel, so I stopped, get something, pretty much every day. I was like, oh, wow. A little bit less than what was here yesterday. I was a little bit less than what was here the day before, and still steadily less and less and less. And that's what I see going to happen. People aren't making stuff. People aren't distributing stuff. People ain't going to be selling stuff. So I think the shortages are here, and they're going to be here for a while, and I think it's going to sink in. And then, of course, what they're doing with the money is inflating it, and then shortages and supply and demand and prices go up. I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I think we're going to see more and more crackdowns and more controls. But I think with Americans, I think we are pretty spoiled, actually. Not like we've really had much hardships. I mean, yeah, individuals have, but speaking as a collective, it's a pretty well-fed nation, Take that away, and I don't think they're going to be as docile as they're being right now.
Well, look at Lila just posted a remark. Says, if government keeps doing this, will the rebellion grow, or will we as a society give up because we prefer things to be calm? I think this is kind of like what I learned from you, David. Again, things that we see as imminent or see that it's going to happen, we expect it to happen immediately. And I like stories in history. So go back. The Declaration of Independence didn't say, yesterday these jackholes did this to us and now we're rising up. It said after a long train of abuses, after
Yes, I agree.
170, 150 years, even to them, they felt like they're being abused by their king. After all those years, long train of abuses, they finally said, no more. So it's
I think
not
that
a
had to start with people
overnight.
saying, "Hey, this is abusive." Right? It had to start with some dissenters, man. It had to start with some people, some moral people saying, "You know what? This isn't right. This is wrong, and this is why it's wrong." It had to start with that, and then more abuses, and more abuses, and then right. So I think that goes to my original point. I
Well,
guess
easy thing to do when you're
I'm not going to
when
be
you're going
silent, dude. I'm going to call BS BS, and this is BS.
right when you go buy
Yeah.
parts or paint or something like that for your work, and you're in there with 4 or 5 other guys, and they're watching Fox News or something, and they say something stupid on there, and they all go, "Yeah, say something about it." I do it all the time. I love it. And everyone kind of stares at you like you're a freak, but you might plant a seed in 2 or 3 of those guys. We're like, hadn't thought about it that way. Just a little comment.
Yeah, yeah, and same here. I've been that way for years. So, and I've got a little bit more tactical with it and better and this and that over the years.
That
Oh,
helps.
but I would sure like to have a conversation with Dunleavy for starters. Has anybody not said anything like, dude, like where you get off, man? And why are you people listening to him? You know, it's like, you have no right. You know why he has no right to do that? Because nobody has a right to do that. You guys know. He's got no authority. You know why he's got no authority? Because nobody else had the authority to give him that authority.
Well, it shouldn't be surprising, though, because, look at Hayek's Road to Serfdom in Chapter 10. The whole point of that, and Wenzel remarks about it constantly in his blogs. Why the worst rise to the top? We should expect that from the guys at the top, even governors. It's like I was saying with the left-right dichotomy. There is none. They're all leftist socialist. All of them are. And like Dave said, this has been a great opportunity for them to show their true colors.
Yes.
And we're not surprised.
Yeah. I can't say I'm really surprised, but I'm just that they're socialist and totalitarian and all that. I'm not surprised. I'm just surprised at, I guess, the level. I mean, we're essentially in, I wasn't there, but this seems to me what Stalin's Russia must have been. They're controlling people's speech, religion, freedom of movement, freedom to associate or disassociate. That's all gone.
There's a lot less dead people.
Like I can't think for myself and use my hands for myself or prepare for myself what might be coming down in the future to help my family. No, you can't. Well, who are you to say I can't?
Yeah, it's I like both of those views are interesting. I mean, Josh, you said there's a lot less dead people, that's for sure. But man, this is only a month in.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of ground to take in a month. And the Bolsheviks, like the Bolshevik Revolution was in 1917. But they started going around to communities. This would be like an analogy would be the Agenda 21 folks. They started going around to communities in the late 1800s. They worked on that for like 20 years before the revolution. And then there was this quick acceleration in October. But it took 6 years. The Russian Revolution was 1917 to 1923. Could you imagine? So we're 1 month in, 6 months, 6 years is 72 months, right? We're 1 month in. So imagine 72 more months like this.
Oh, I'm seeing it. I don't think we're going back to. I obviously don't have any timelines. I obviously don't really know how bad or this bad. I can only speculate. But I think what we knew 2 weeks ago is gone forever, or gone in our lifetime. It's gone. So I think people are just gonna. I mean, controls never go away, right? And more controls come from controls. and then more controls from them controls and this and that. So, you know, I can easily see them trying to do a forced vaccination. I can easily see them trying to implement this ID 2020 stuff, which I'm not taking. First, I'm not doing either one. When I say no, I mean no. And I mean no. So I'm not doing it. But I'm not going to stop anybody from doing it. If that's what y'all want to do, you know, not y'all, but, you know, they can do that. But I'm not doing that. To me, that's the mark of the beast right there, man. So, no. And even if I wasn't spiritual, I would still say no, because I'm not living under Stalin. I just have to be one of the guys who died, you know, calling out Stalin for, you know, BS. So,
You know, we have seen a time
what's coming.
somewhat like this in World War II.
We have to force vaccinations. We have to make sure this never happens again. And everybody's going to have to prove that they've been vaccinated, or they can't go to the store, and they can't buy, and they can't sell, and they can't fly, and they can't drive. And I see you can't go to a stadium. You can't do nothing. You can't do nothing if you're not vaccinated. I easily see that happening. Maybe not next week. Maybe not next month. But they're going to be talking about it, and they're going to be going after it, and they're probably going to get it. And that's going to put...
What can you do if you don't have it?
Go live like the deer, man. If you can. I already see persecution coming for Christians at one church in Louisiana, you know, who they still decided to have service. And take my hat off to them, you know. But comments on YouTube and on the papers and stuff like that has been short of basically saying crucify them. Just a hair short of that. And that's what I see. And I don't think that's going to go away.
You know, there's a few interesting 9/11 crossover stories. One of them was there's this dude who was going to Walmart and like licking stuff on the Walmart shelves to demonstrate that he thought COVID-19 was overhyped. And he was arrested for an act of terrorism. So he was arrested under a 9/11 law. And I don't think that what he was doing was right, mostly because he was like violating the social norms of his community. But terrorism? Like, really?
Right. Yeah, and none of those 9/11 laws went away. I had a brother who went to federal prison, for 3.5 years while he was going through a divorce with his wife. There at the beginning of it, and she recorded phone conversations, and they were very nasty, you know. But he went to prison for interstate terroristic death threats. FBI kicked in his door. That was around 2003. And he's never recovered. He was a firefighter and EMT before that. I think a lieutenant. Very, very much about his craft, his trade. Very much all about it. Very studious, very into it. Yep. So he couldn't go back to firefighting after, you know, being condemned as a terrorist. And I think, yeah. And I agree with you, David. That dude was wrong. First off, it wasn't his property.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't just go licking other people's property like that, man. I mean, that's it's definitely
Even on a good day.
violation, and there's got to be consequences for stuff like that. Even in an anarchist community, we are going to have consequences for that kind of behavior. Promise you that. So, dude, don't come over here licking my stuff. But yeah, so I think we're on the same page. This is just going to keep getting ratcheted up and ratcheted up. But at the same time, I think the economy is going to get worse and worse and worse, and they're going to ratchet more and more, and then more. I think the writing's on the wall. This is going to be a horrible decade.
Well, it will be a challenging decade if you act on information as it's presented, and if you act in ways that you're advised to act in. But there's a whole bunch of legal things that we can do, even if we're kind of stuck within the system, that will actually have us in pretty good shape, like relatively speaking. So I agree. It's going to be a challenging decade It's going to be a challenging decade in that institutions are going to ratchet down, but we have information that we can act on, and to the extent that we actually act on it and do stuff with it, it doesn't have to be terrible for us. And then other people will have some freedom to make their own choices in life. And at some point, that choice will probably be to stay or to leave.
Oh, I'm definitely out. I'm kicking myself for not already being out, because I could already be out. I was just trying to get a nice sailboat, a little bit nicer. I can get a sailboat now, but I'm like, ooh, if I hold off a little bit longer, I can get a 40-footer. But it's all about sailboat for me for these past few years, and now I'm kicking myself. Why didn't I just get that 28-footer? But I'm definitely out if I can get out. Most
Right.
definitely. I've seen enough.
Yeah. Oh man, we got a new
South Pacific. That's where I'm going. I'm going South Pacific, y'all.
Yeah, South Pacific's pretty good. I'm looking at a couple places in Ecuador that I've been before. Again, more seriously than I have.
Yeah.
Like seriously enough that I would
What
like.
legal things do you mean? What legal things can?
Well, like we're all allowed to still participate.
I know nothing about legal things, but class action lawsuit against gun levy?
No, not like that. Like the banking system is a scam. We know that. Wall Street's a scam. We know that. But you can trade gold and silver through the banking system on Wall Street, and they haven't shut off anybody's bank account yet. I mean, there's no reason to be an idiot, is what I'm saying. There's no reason to sit around and be helpless and go, well, everything sucks, so we can't do anything. Because there's lots of things that we can do. Now, that's you do what you can, exactly. But if we're action oriented instead of, I think the libertarian community and the anarcho-capitalist community in particular, of which I consider myself a member of, not like card carrying style, but like philosophically, has been radically information heavy and very light on action. It's a bunch of people who they read 20 books for every one thing that they do.
Yep.
Like I'm in that category.
Dude, that was my exact thoughts.
Right.
Like these are great idea people, but they don't know how to implement. Very few of them actually know how to implement.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why, and at Acapulco, we had.
That's where I can help out, because that's actually what I do for a living. I implement.
Right.
So.
Yep. It's about doing it. I mean, at Acapulco, there was the interesting situation where a lot of the activist types were saying, "Hey, if you made a bunch of money off Bitcoin, you should give me some, because I didn't." And so you could see the divide between the information side and the action side. And I think that we need, for those of us who are information heavy, we need to be a little bit more action oriented. Like we missed a lot of stuff. Like we missed the crypto bandwagon, right? Well, why miss it again? Why miss the gold silver bandwagon?
Y'all's shows talking about the platinum, the silver, the gold, the this or that. I don't know very much about that. I mean, Corey, Josh, you, Mike, I lean on y'all for that kind of information. I don't know. Should I leave the money in the bank? Should I take it out and put it in silver? Am I going to be able to sell my silver and gold? Should I get that platinum? It sounds good, probably should. What should I do? I'm not on the crypto bandwagon. Maybe somebody can talk me into it. I think it's backed by the dollar. It's all speculative. It's backed by the dollar.
Well, everything is.
Keep creating that.
Yeah, everything's sort of speculative because nobody knows the future. That's kind of the interesting part about it. But and that's fine. Nobody here knows the future. That's for sure.
Right.
But we have missed so many things. We have missed so many because we talk about it and talk about the theory and talk about the book and talk about the guy, and we have the guy on the show, and the talking about stuff is great. And now we have an opportunity to do stuff. So, like you're saying, oh well, I don't know what the right asset to buy is. That's fine. Like that might not be your thing. You're going different places. You're checking them out. You're scoping them out. You're saying, where would I want to go? And as you go to these places and let us know how they are, that's super useful. And then it's up to us to, if you find a place that's super rad and you like it, it's up to us to actually do something, like to go and see it for ourselves.
That information itself is valuable.
Yeah, that's true. And it's firsthand information too. It's real. So that's what I'm talking about. And we have a window, you always have a window. You always have choices you can make and things you can do, no matter how, bad things get. But that is our opportunity as things get weird, is to take more action.
Yeah, I think this is, for sure. I agree with all of that. And continue to make yourself as anti-fragile as you possibly can. But I think especially mentally, I think that's going to be the most important thing at the end of the day. You got to control yourself emotionally and mentally and get prepared. But for me, somebody who's been on the fence as far as getting out, and I'm not saying there's better places or this or that. I'm not. This was kind of like, I'm taking it like God saying, all right, this is your last warning. Get out.
Yeah, there's a lot of signals.
The other option there is stay to help those who can't get out. There's
I agree with that too, Corey, and whoever's statement on the live chat. Yes, definitely, for sure, always help people. I definitely draw strength from that. If you can't do good for yourself, you can always do good for somebody else. That's great. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't beat yourself up if you can't.
Viktor Frankl's stuff was about, no matter what your external situation is, if you have good control over your internal situation, nobody can control your response to whatever is going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting about this too, because it's been the whole COVID thing. It's been shock and awe, psychologically. It's been shock and awe. It came really fast, and it frazzled people, and that's the state that people are in right now. They're frazzled. And we're going to have to unfrazzle ourselves to move forward.
And part of that's because everybody is so on the knife edge. Like you talked about minimalism and anti-fragility. They're sort of the same thing. Like you were saying, stuff requires maintenance. And if you got a big pile of stuff, it's like, if you got a big pile of stuff, you're maintaining it all the time.
Oops, lost David. I was thinking about the same thing too.
How can we lose him?
I don't know. Are we still on?
He's hosting it.
Can somebody in the comments say if we're still on? Okay.
Okay.
I was thinking about the same thing. Property rights are valuable, and we need property rights, but rights are inherently also responsibilities. So you have right to a bunch of property. You're also responsible for it, and that's a big responsibility.
Yes, it is.
So
No, I agree with them.
Sometimes
Totally.
that's good, but
I agree.
being careful of how much stuff and responsibility you take on is also important.
I agree, but I don't see how somebody or anybody who's just in the state of mind right now that they want more stuff. I don't want a bigger TV, or I want a nicer house, or I don't know how they ever get out of this system. And that's
They
what
don't.
it is.
They don't. Greed is the trap.
Yep.
Greed is the trap.
And I think to get out of the system, I think you're going to have to people are going to have to sacrifice in the short term. They're going to have to forego some luxury to get away. I guess it's the same with the Pilgrims, right? They wanted to get away from the king. They want to get away from that system.
My question earlier was about what can you do if there's lots of restrictions with the ID 2020 stuff and all that. As long as you have title to property or can buy property, you can still have a small community and grow food, and you can't buy iPhones and stuff, but you can have you can do your own. Presumably, you would be able to do your own thing if it doesn't require
or pay
traveling.
taxes on it, though. How are you going to pay taxes on it?
Well, Corey, you were.
And I got a friend who's wanting to buy a farm right now, and I'm like, dude, and what? If you're not going to do their little ID 2020 thing, how are you going to pay taxes on it? You're going to take it away.
Yeah, there are some co-op models that are pretty cool where you, the taxes are paid out of the productive use of the land, right?
Yeah, you have to produce more than you have to provide value. You got to do something more with it than just survive off it.
The co-ops that you were checking out when you were down in Nevada and California recently, those sounded pretty cool. Where you actually the community was responsible for the upkeep, maintenance, and productive use of the land, but it wasn't a commune.
Yeah, they had some interesting stuff in how their charters were set up so that they couldn't be taken over by large. Individual members couldn't have more than one share. So it was kind of they're trying to get a
one vote.
Right.
One
democratic
vote. Right. They get one vote. You can have more in a co-op. Like you can have somebody who has a larger share and hence they're taking out more, but they still only have one vote.
Right. You can distribute the capital however you want, but the voting and decision making is distributed so that it can't be collected in one party.
Now, you noticed a really interesting behavior among those people. You went to this conference and they had a bunch of different seminars on different aspects of it. And you said basically that the seminars on productive techniques, like how do you make your land work better for you, were super full. And the ones that were tell us about that.
Yeah, so there was it's a small organic farm conference in Monterey, California. So they had a bunch of classes on diversity and equity and all the stuff that goes with that. I didn't go to any of those, but you can see online how many people check in for classes, and it was always the same number of people, and it was a relatively small number of people that went to those. And there was a couple classes on dealing with regulation and soil management and nuts and bolts, how to operate the farm. And some of those classes were standing room only. They had really underestimated how popular those would be. It was an action oriented group.
Hey, I'm gonna get off the phone, fellas. Somebody else might be trying to call in, but hey, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Keep doing what you're doing, and Yeah, I'm gonna pray for y'all. Hopefully, y'all will pray for me.
All right.
For sure.
Good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
You know, there was a time, and this came to a thought came to mind because I recently read an article, "Time for the New Deal." It was basically a throwback, to FDR. This is the time to roll out the New Deal, and it got me thinking. I wonder what people, there were people that loved freedom back then too, and the president then did some horrific things that we still feel the effects of today using the Commerce Clause. And he rounded up 300 and some thousand Japanese Americans and threw them all into concentration camps and put barbed wire around them. I mean, these things have happened here before.
I have a friend whose parents were in, they were in one of the camps. And she sent me a quote from, I think, her aunt, who was also there. And I'm trying to find it right now, but it was basically like, I can't believe these people are just going along with this. They're just listening to what they're being told.
Yeah, it's not unprecedented here in the States. I imagine it looked pretty bad. I mean, the Civil War, the War of Northern Aggression. What did Lincoln do? He suspended habeas corpus and rounded up people that were vocal against the war and threw them in prison for the remainder of his, thankfully, short life. Look at World War One. They were rounding up people that were anti-war and throwing them in prison for speaking out against the war.
I found it here. This is, I was texting my aunt who was in the camps, told me today, we're just doing what we are told.
Yep, that's coming. Leela's comment in the chat was that she thinks that next year will be round two. Next winter, when the quarantine starts again, the depression will set in and people will accept their new normal.
Well, what's his name? All I can think of is the word fascist. Who's the president's little guy that with the gray hair, that the doctor? Dang it.
Oh,
Fauci?
Fauci, yeah. It's close enough. That's why it's all I could think of. So he's already saying this is the new normal. I mean, he says, he expects this to be next winter and the winter after that. He said that just the other day on live television. He said that's what he expects it to do.
Mm-hmm.
So will the response be the same every time? Are we going to have a $6 trillion bailout every March from now on, with a following Easter bailout and a following, another one and another one? That can't be sustained, I wouldn't think, but maybe this is.
Who knows? I mean, it's a good way to squeeze. Eventually, your small businesses are just going to go broke too.
Done.
Like if
It's
they
not
have to
worth
shut
it too.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Do you guys think it's possible? I mean, let's clear something up. Is it possible to go back to the way it was? Right. Nope. That might be the hurdle to cross for a lot of people, to get that in your mind, which I guess that's what we kind of started on the show with. The Humpty Dumpty thing. We're not rebuilding this. It's not going to be the same. So get that out of your mind. There's no more Make America Great Again. It's time to make anarchism great again. That's what's coming. That's what we want.
Yep. Things are moving forward, not back. We got a call.
Yeah.
We're-
Could I?
yeah, jump in. Yeah,
no
do it.
rent and mortgage payments there. Also, the college debt is not forgiven, but I think the precursor. This is just a precursor to it. They did try to forgive all student debt, but they delayed payments, and the interest rate is at 0 for the next 3 months, and it'll be looked at again. That's what the bill that was passed yesterday. So the rent forgiveness. They can't kick you out of your house. They can't force you to pay your mortgage. They can't force you. The owners. I didn't see anything where the government was guaranteeing payments for that yet, but I imagine if they're going to keep enforcing that, they'd have to guarantee payments for rentals and stuff. Utilities, people that have had their utilities shut off, particularly water. And I was reading about some people in Chicago and stuff that hadn't had water for decades. And the city's coming in and fixing their pipes and everything, and they can't shut off anyone's utilities now, which is kind of interesting when you look at what utilities are public. They're all public utilities, right? It's the state that's demanding that you pay them or they're going to shut you off. And so they're going into poorer places in the United States and giving their water services back, which is kind of interesting because they can't charge them. That's part of the law too. They can't charge the people that had their water shut off for the new water rates. So that's probably something, will they ever go back to that? Do we really think they'll ever shut their water off again? Will they ever make us pay rent again? Will they ever make us pay our mortgage again? Right?
How can you ever ratchet any of this down?
$1 trillion, $1 trillion or so of the student loans. Can they ever start making them pay it again? No, they're gonna have to forgive it all.
You can only put more stuff on the pile.
Yep. Because let's just say, in 3 months, they say you can't do it for 3 months. Well, what if you're still not working in 3 months? Can you all of a sudden start paying your back pay for 3 months ago? No, there's no way. There's no recouping. There's no way to get what's been lost.
Can the government or any organization insulate you from suffering or harm?
Temporarily.
Right. I think we live in a culture where nobody's allowed to suffer. Not saying that you should seek the opposite, but the attempt to only have good times, I think, eventually leads to the opposite on its own. You can't sustain that. So.
Americans never accept suffering of any kind.
Yeah. We are at 3 hours. We're actually past it. We got one caller on. We'll do this call and then we'll wrap up.
All right.
All right, caller, you
Good morning,
are
guys.
on. How's it going?
Good morning. This is Layla.
Hey, Layla.
So, Layla, the Alaska Buddha asked you guys to submit the 5 stages of grief, and so I actually did it in the chat. And I think that it's important for people to think about this. Right now, we're in denial. Most people in America, not necessarily this group, but most people in America and Western Europe think this is going to be over in a month or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that on my Facebook chats that I do, where I post a liberty-based comment and people respond. There's some people who are going, I'm getting tired of this, but most people are like, oh, it'll be fine. Another month, it'll be good, and the virus will be over. That's denial. That's that stage of grief, that first stage of grief. Come summer, when they start letting up on this, people are going to start getting pissed off because they're going to realize that their job that went away for a little while isn't coming back. I mean, all these service-based industries, they can't be closed for more than about 30 days, and they go into the red. And so they're just going to start selling off because they can't afford not to, and or filing bankruptcy. And then after that, there's going to be a period of bargaining. People are going to start begging the government to let them have a life again. And the government's going to give them reasons why they can't do that, or they're going to promise that, yes, in 6 months we'll do that. And people will be, they'll spend some time doing that. And it'll look like redress of the government for grievances, right? So people will look like, hey, this is going to be, it's going to work. It'll be fine. And then winter will come, and they're going to put us back on quarantine. And that's when the depression sets in. That's what I was saying in there. The depression sets in, and everybody goes, oh, my God, this is never changing. This is the world. The world we now live in. Our lives ended back in March last year. And then there's going to be most people are going to accept their new normal after that, of getting hopefully some kind of government support, and everything will be wonderful. And hopefully there'll still be some people out here who will be like, no, I'm not putting up with that. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to do the stuff that they're not giving me permission to do. But that's going to be a subset. That's going to be, a small number of people who are willing to do that. And that's just kind of the way I see it, and when Buddha suggested the stages of grief, it was like, as I was ticking down them, I was like, whoa. Yeah, as a writer, I can see that really easily, that's how the world is going to work, because that is people.
Mm-hmm. That's how it'll play out. Yeah, it's people. Yep.
Yeah, because, and especially since what will save us, I think, there's going to be a few people like you guys who are still doing stuff anyways, but what's going to save us are the young kids, the ones that, because this generation, these younger kids, millennials get a lot of bad rap, but a lot of them already were geared up from 2008 to not trust stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like my daughter, she picks vegetables, she's a musician, which, by the way, right now is not a job you want to be doing. You can't make any money at it.
Well, it doesn't pay any less than it normally does.
Yeah. She said when she was in New Orleans, people wouldn't get within 20 feet of her.
Right.
She said they wouldn't even look her in the eye. And they were all gloved up and the masks on and the hoodie up. And yeah, she said it was scary there. She got back to California where at least she can work, in the fields. I don't think pays taxes very often, which scares me as her mother, because that's a 7-year prison term if they nail you for tax evasion. But I don't think the government's going to be around too much longer to be able to do that. At least not this government. So that's my theory.
Well, there's many advantages. So being at the bottom, there's many advantages to that, which is one of the, there's a bunch of stuff in the scriptures about how wealth is not necessarily something that works in your favor. And there's a lot of interpretations of that, but one interpretation of that is you have a lot of freedom and not a lot of people gunning for you when you're at the bottom, so to speak, because nobody's envious of your position, for one. And if the system gets highly disrupted, your lifestyle doesn't actually change that much. And you even see this in Fairbanks. I have a friend who has he has 8 or 10 cabin rentals, and I think the nicest one is $650 or $700 a month. And when there's big disruptions in the housing market in the interior, he's basically not affected at all. In fact, the people trying to rent his places goes up, because when people can't afford an expensive rental, they still need a place to live. And so the bottom of society is in many ways the most stable part of society.
Yeah, and I know in 2008 we actually and 2009 and that area in there, we actually rented rooms here in our house because there was a market for it, and if you can tolerate having strangers in your house, it's a way to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, your daughter in a way is sort of anti-fragile in the way that Scott talks about. And then for the rest of us, you were talking about, there being a time when these things we want to do are illegal. That's one of the reasons to get residency in another jurisdiction. Even if you're not going to live there or bug out there, you have a place that you can go for a large portion of the year where you can do things legally that you can't do in your normal home, including
The only thing is,
trading
I
goods and whatever.
foresee that there's going to come a time when we're not going to be able to fly anywhere without a special permit.
Yeah, that could be the case.
You have to prove that you don't have COVID for one thing, or some other disease.
Yeah, that could be the case. That could be the case. And so then you'll be stuck with the options that you have available when that date comes.
Yeah.
But until then, you can still act and make decisions.
Yep, until then you can act.
Right.
Yeah, including like crypto cash outs. Like where do you cash out your crypto? It's kind of there's questions
Right.
about that. If you do it in other jurisdictions, there's all sorts of ways that you can do it that are like outside of the system if you do it in other jurisdictions. If you do it in the US, it's really hard to do. I mean, even if you do it in Canada, like the US has this is just an example. The US has two categories. They have short-term capital gains and then they have long-term capital gains. And so if you're a trader, if you're trading crypto on a crypto exchange, you're supposed to track all that stuff. And then you're supposed to report all your income as to which capital gains it falls under. In Canada, they don't have that. So the only thing you have to do is track your cost basis. How much money did I put into the exchange? How much money did I take out? The difference is your profit. There's one number. That's the tax you pay. So, and then if you do your crypto trading in Mexico or whatever, they probably don't even have a way of categorizing it. So there's all sorts of little things you can do if you have a few jurisdictions at your disposal. And it doesn't necessarily involve living there. It's just, a place you can go spend some time. It's like if you're a snowbird, which a lot of people in Alaska are, why fly to Arizona in the winter? Why not fly to Ecuador or, someplace like that?
Do you guys know if they got the cryptocurrency competition thing into that latest bill? Because I know it was part of it, but then I don't know if it got actually passed on.
Yeah, I don't know that. I know that it was proposed, and the Fed coin thing, the Federal Reserve crypto was proposed in there too, but I don't know what's actually in there yet. We'll find out soon, I'm sure.
Because I think what they're trying to move to is a way that they can track every transaction we make.
For sure. They were already making really good progress on that until crypto emerged in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I had
thank you, gentlemen.
some thoughts on that. Maybe we can cover in a later show. I titled it "Life as a Service," and instead of software as a service.
Mm-hmm.
But it I think it has to do with the Fed coin and inflation and another time.
Okay, cool. Maybe on Monday for our financial wrap-up show. Awesome. Thanks for the call, Leela.
Bye.
Good deal.
Yeah, good show. Very minimal amount of Fox News.
Yeah, we could have injected a little bit. I
Just to
always
feel the
like
twinge.
listening to your show normally when it's on the radio. You guys will be talking about something, and then Fox News, and it's such a weird juxtaposition because it's happened a couple of times where you're talking about a similar thing or the same thing, but very different perspective on it.
Yeah. It's ironic sometimes, some of the stuff they come up with.
Who's listening to who?
Yeah, no joke. Well, I think we've already established that we are getting rid of the Jones Act, so they obviously are listening in.
Yes.
Actually, they told us they were listening once, didn't they?
They did tell us they were listening once. Yes, they did.
Yes, they did.
Love you,
Did we tell Corey about that before he came on?
No. There's a Corporate Avengers song about it, though. It's called FBI File.
Yes, I know that one.
Yeah.
Be a good one to
File.
close the show.
Oh, we could do that.
That would be. It's not exactly radio clean.
Oh,
We're not on the
then maybe
radio.
not.
Yeah, that's true. We are family friendly, though.
Yeah.
I'll see if there's a family-friendly version of Corporate Avengers. I think probably not.
I haven't found one. There is a family friendly version of that Head PE song, though.
Oh,
Let's do
yes.
that.
We could close it out with that. That was awesome.
Let's do that.
You got that one?
Yeah, what's the name of that one?
Tis Ordo
Abkeo.
Abkeo. Yep.
Yep, Order out of Chaos. Here.
All right, then we're signing off.
Yep. Let me kick this link to Corey. That'll actually be the easiest way to do it, and you got it on there. I'll put it in the private chat here.
Rick and Scott will want to hang out for this.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Throw it on some caller relay screen. Do we get audio through that?
Yes. Yeah, you
Cool.
should have. It should just work.
Awesome.
Even if it's not screen share. Do we want
Cool.
video?
Yeah. It's a music video.
Share screen.
It's much better as a music video, actually.
Oops, we're on mute there.
You're muted?
Oh, yeah, I can tell. I can tell it's much better.
Oh, that's because you got caller relay on the audio. Caller relay's audio is through the other thing there.
Let's try that.
I like.
Oop.
Nope. No love.
No audio?
No. I'm going to do it here, and I'm just going to do a screen share. You guys can let me know if it's working. Oh, brutal.
Okay. Well, we got some stuff to work on.
Yeah, I'm going to get that cable working here. Let me do the screen share.
Okay.
Share screen. I don't know if this is going to work with the audio. I bet it won't. Let's go full screen here. Nice. Entire screen. Allow.
No audio there either. Nope.
No audio?
No.
Shame. Okay.
Yeah.
Link there.
They can all see what they're missing out on, though.
Yeah, they can. It's good video. It's in the live chat over there. That way. Check it out. We'll figure some of the rest of this out. Yep. Cool.
All
It's
right.
been a
Yeah.
good 3 hours. We'll check you guys later.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks for
Talk with you guys.
calling in, guys, too. And thank you, too.
Yeah, callers make it. Bye.
Good stuff. All right.
See you guys.